all those who are holding tickets outside for getting as fast as they can. I'm speaking not to you, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm speaking to the crowd on the outside, who seem to be standing rather reluctant to come in, and we're going to start this very soon.
Welcome back to Worthy. My name is Jon.
And I'm Ben.
And today we're talking about the 31st Best Picture winner, Gigi. And before we do, we wanted to talk about, something familiar with this film that a lot of people talk about, and that is a taboo topic, or a film or an art piece or some work of fiction that is taboo. And we wanted to talk a little bit about this because Gigi has topics that some may find inappropriate these days, especially in 2022, since the film takes place in 1900 and is about sex and sexuality and a young woman falling in love with an older man. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about a couple films here, and I wanted to talk about how we as viewers should be a little bit disconnected when it comes to, or I shouldn't say disconnected, but disassociated to taboo topics, that we should look at them from the perspective of how the filmmakers are seeing them and presenting them, how the characters are interacting within the film, and overall, obviously, the filmic elements that make up the entire picture, and whether we can, not agree with a certain topic or a certain aspect of a film or a character's decision in a film, but still like a film. So, Ben, I wanted to just ask you off the top here if there's any kind of film that comes out to you that you think of as like a taboo topic. And I think there's two different kind of subsections you could kind of pick when we're talking about taboo films. And there's two different sections for me personally when I think of them. And I think of more artistic filmmakers, more auteur filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, who made Lolita, or David Cronenberg's Crash, or Ingmar Bergman's Persona. And then on the other side, you have something kind of trashy, like a Serbian film, the 8mm, things that are really raunchy and just about topics that are really taboo and may not honored as being such high art, or by auteurs, made by auteurs or not. So Ben, any films that jumped out to you? Any films that you love or hate the topics or the taboo topics in them?
Yeah, I think when we talk about taboo and what is a taboo film, I was trying to look up films what IMDb listed, and most of it just has to do with sex.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of hard for today's standards to call a lot of it taboo. So it's what is it about sex that makes it taboo? So like you just said, with Lolita, it's a young girl, being groomed and being brought around by an older man. And then I also think of Kubrick's his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, which has to do with these sub cultures of people who are in high society and how they deal with sex, and then the taboo around that. So I think I the mind immediately jumps to there, but then with modern day, it's hard to kind of say sex is taboo because everyone is so sex positive nowadays. So it's really hard. I think that you'd have to go to really great lengths to go to the fringe ideas of films and what filmmakers are trying to talk about to call it taboo. So I think that word it's hard to also describe. But when we are talking about with Gigi, I think the one sexual aspect of things that is taboo and you shouldn't be talking about and shouldn't be praised in an awards way, which is about younger people, specifically people under the age of 18, and older people who's over the age of 18, having sexual relationships with them. I think that's the boundary, at least for me, where I'm just that can't necessarily be praised, and if it is talked about, it has to be done in a very, I want to use the word sophisticated, but maybe that's not the best word, way of talking about these, showing a story like that, because it's so hard for me to look at a movie like Gigi, and we'll get into it, and be praise it so much because of the messaging that comes across from it. So that word taboo, I think, is really hard to define, but it obviously, I think, has to do with mostly sex and themes of that as to, what, that's taboo for filmmakers in Hollywood.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is about how delicate and how you kind of approach the topic, I think, and whether, you know, the writer or the director is kind of like spewing the themes that like you may not agree with, and whether that is done with some nuance or not is a huge deal. And I think that's why I wanted to separate from films like 50 Shades of Grey versus like Stanley Kubrick's Lolita, is because there's an artistic standard that I think comes with any Kubrick film. And with a topic that you may not agree with, like a very similar topic to what we have in Gigi, you may just be fascinated by how the story is told, how well it's acted. And I think you can get some of that from our film today. But I wanted to talk a little more about, you know, when a place or a film takes place in a certain time. And, you know, with Gigi, it takes place in exactly 1900, and also the time in which the film comes out in 1958 here. So with that in mind, like, you have to take both of these in your mind and kind of think about what time and place these characters are in, and then also when this film was released and how that kind of directly changes your mind. And I think a big deal about this is that it's a very controversial topic that the film's about, and when you look at it today, of course you're not going to agree with something that was happening over 100 years ago in the cultural standards that were happening 100 years ago. So I think there is a huge gap of people just not addressing that or talking about that, and that's a very specific way you should be critiquing art, especially art that's dated. And I wanted to just read a quick little quote here because I think it kind of summarizes exactly what I'm trying to hint at here. And it's in her article on Gone with the Wind, the film critic and author Molly Haskell noted that our view of films must and need to evolve over time. She wrote, "Films change, we change, context changes, and that's all part of the ongoing and vital fascination of movies." So I felt that it was a necessary thing to read because I think we should always be educated as viewers. I always talk about how I don't like knowing that much going into a film, but you know, if I'm presented with a taboo topic in a film, I think you need to know where this film is coming from, who made it, when it was made, and when the story actually takes place. So Ben, is there anything else you would like to add about taboo topics in film?
Yeah, just hearing that quote, like I get it, and I appreciate it, and I agree with the sentiment that we change, ideas change, views change, and that's all well and good. And I think the other aspect of that with filmmaking is, well, is it a good film? Does it actually add to the art of filmmaking? Is it a good story that's being told? And I think that what we'll find in this conversation about Gigi is that it doesn't necessarily match up. And I think like that's the thing to remember is like, yeah, ideas change. We can all have different opinions. We can acknowledge that 1958 social politics are not 2022 social politics, depending on where you are in the United States. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that makes it a good movie. And there are technical aspects to me that are vitally important to make it a good movie. And then when you talk about awarding it in the Oscars, the Emmys, Golden Globes, whatever, any award, you want it to be good. You want it to be substantial. You want there to be a reason, a true reason for why that movie gets the recognition that people think that it deserves. So we'll definitely get into that. So first, let me ask that question to you, Jon. Is Gigi worthy of the Best Picture Award of 1958?
Gigi, weary of the conventions of Parisian society, a rich playboy and a youthful courtesan in training, enjoy a platonic friendship that may not stay platonic for long.
The film is set during the turn of the 20th century. While in Bois de Boulogne, Henri Lachelle remarks that in Paris, marriage is not the sole option for a wealthy young man like his nephew Gaston, who is bored with life. Gaston does enjoy spending time with Madame Alvarez and her granddaughter, the precocious carefree Gigi. Gigi's mother, a singer who is heard but never seen on screen, leaves her care mostly to Madame Alvarez.
Following the family tradition, Madame Alvarez regularly sends Gigi to her sister, Alicia, Gigi's great aunt, to be groomed as a courtesan, which is a more dignified euphemism for a wealthy man's mistress. She learns proper etiquette and charm, but Gigi disdains the trivial love between a man and his mistress. She prefers having fun with Gaston, who she regards as an older brother.
Like his uncle, Gaston is a known wealthy womanizer in Parisian high society. When his latest mistress has an affair with her ice skating instructor, Gaston publicly humiliates her, resulting in her fake attempted suicide. Gaston plans to retreat to the country, but his uncle insists he remains in Paris and attends even more parties.
While playing cards with Gaston, Gigi wagers that if he loses, he must take her and her grandmother to the seaside for the weekend. Gaston agrees, loses the bet, and the three travel to Trouville. While Gaston and Gigi are having fun together, Henri and Madame Alvarez unexpectedly reunite and reminisce about their once passionate affair. As other women at the resort hold perfect poise with an air of boredom or disdain for anything unfamiliar, Gigi pulls Gaston out of his depressive rut with her carefree attitude.
When Gaston goes to Monte Carlo, Great Aunt Alicia and Madame Alvarez scheme to turn Gigi into Gaston's mistress. Though initially dubious, Madame Alvarez agrees to Gigi being intensively trained before Gaston's return. Gigi accepts. When Gaston returns, he is uneasy when Gigi shows off her new womanly gown. Gaston insults the dress, preferring her juvenile outfits. Gigi mocks his taste in clothes. Offended, Gaston storms out, then quickly realizes his folly and returns to apologize. He offers to take Gigi to a tea at the reservoir, but Madame Alvarez interjects, telling Gaston that an unchaperoned Gigi being seen in public with him could damage her reputation.
Angered, Gaston storms out again. He walks and reflects on Gigi, realizing he has developed a romantic desire for her. Although hesitant due to her young age, Gaston realizes that he loves Gigi. He wishes only to be near her, an unheard of behavior between a man and his mistress. Despite such convention, he proposes a generous business agreement to Madame Alvarez and Aunt Alicia for Gigi to become his mistress. The women are overjoyed by his offer, though Gigi is not.
Gigi refuses, telling Gaston she does not seek celebrity status only to eventually be abandoned by him and become another man's mistress. She wants the relationship to remain platonic, but when Gaston suddenly reveals that he loves her, Gigi bursts into tears. She chastises him, saying if he truly loved her, he would never expose her to a mistress's uncertain life. Gaston leaves dejected and is angry at Madame Alvarez, claiming she only emphasized the proposition's sordidness. He then speaks of Henri, who says that Gigi's family has always been rather odd. Gigi later sends for Gaston and tells him that she would rather be miserable with him than without him, and agrees to the arrangement. When Gaston arrives for their final social outing, he is unexpectedly entranced by the transformed Gigi's elegant beauty.
The couple goes to Maxim's restaurant and Gigi performs perfectly as his courtesan, which only upsets Gaston. After presenting her with an expensive diamond bracelet, he grows uneasy with the unrelenting scrutiny being heaped on them. Henri delivers a crushing blow when he congratulates Gaston on his new courtesan and remarks that Gigi is so delightful that she will likely keep him amused for months.
Gaston, too in love with Gigi to subject her to an appalling life of uncertainty and social judgment, brusquely insists they leave. He drags Gigi up the stairs and into her grandmother's apartment. Sobbing hysterically, Gigi asks what she did wrong, but Gaston leaves without answering. After walking alone around Paris, Gaston realizes the depth of his love and soon returns. He asks Madame Alvarez for Gigi's hand in marriage, and Gigi is overjoyed, as is her grandmother. The final sequence returns to Henri, who proudly points out Gaston and Gigi in a horse carriage, elegant, beautiful, and happily married.
Gigi is directed by Vincente Minnelli, and uncredited sequences from Charles Walters.
Written by Alan J. Lerner, based on the novella by Colette.
Produced by Arthur Freed.
Music by Andre Previn and Conrad Salinger.
Cinematography by Joseph Ruttenberg with uncredited cinematography by George Barsky and Ray June.
Film editing by Adrian Fazan.
Casting by Bobby Webb.
And production design by Cecil Beaton.
Gigi stars Leslie Caron as Gigi.
Maurice Chevalier as Henri Lachelle.
Louise Jourdan as Gaston Lachelle.
Hermione Gingold as Madame Alvarez.
Ava Gabor as Leanne.
Isabelle Jeans as Aunt Alicia. So Gigi, the 1958 Best Picture winner. A lot to talk about, a lot to break down, but for the first time on a main episode of Worthy, we have a guest, and we have a guest, Austin Gold. We know Austin from our times back in college, so without further ado, here's Austin Gold.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on? So, Austin, you are we've posted about Gigi. We've talked on Instagram. You've slid into our DMs a few times, and you like Gigi. So I just want to know what it is about Gigi that you like and you're fascinated by. Because when me and Jon have talked about it and watched it, we had some negative feelings. So we just wanted to get your perspective and what you're doing outside of just like being a guest on our podcast. So just want to kick it over to you. Just initial thoughts on the movie.
I first heard about the movie when I was, like in high school, really getting into film, and I saw this Best Picture winner that I had never heard of, and saw that it won like 9 Oscars. Which, how does a movie win 9 Oscars? Yet I've never heard of this. I've never heard it even referenced.
Yeah.
So I watched it, and I understood why it wasn't as well known as some of the others, but I also understood, I think, why it won Best Picture. I was fully enamored with the music in it. I wound up buying it on CD, the original soundtrack and score, which, there's a video component when we're recording, but for the listeners, I'm currently holding the CD right now. But Jon and Ben will notice it is empty because the CD is sitting in my car. So...
We love that. So where do you start? Do you start right at the top, go all the way through, or you jump to a specific
you have like
track
a favorite
here?
song?
Yeah.
If there's one that's in my head, I'll jump to that. But otherwise, it's very pleasant to listen to while stuck in LA traffic. I'll say that.
And I think we asked this off mic, but is this your favorite movie musical? Where does it rank for you in terms of all time musicals? At least in terms of Austin.
In terms of movie musicals, it's either like at the bottom or just missing my top 10 movie musicals.
Okay.
But I will say it has my favorite songs of any original movie musical, which is very specific.
It is very specific,
but
I love that. And you seem to be a great lover of music. I can see the posters behind you are a bunch of artists and albums. So tell us about your experience with music. You worked in the radio station at our college as well, right?
I'm actually wearing a WICB shirt right now.
Representing
our college radio station.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about your love of music, how that kind of started, and how you kind of maybe first got introduced to musicals and just...
I think just movies in general.
Yeah, and movies in general.
Actually, I got into my love of movies from my love of music. Growing up, I was a huge music fan, and in middle school, I was one of those classic rock kids. And I went to a website where it had like 100 greatest classic rock albums, but then also on the site, it had 100 greatest movie list. So I thought, I'm curious how many of these I've seen. I think I saw 2 out of the 100. And I was surprised that I'd seen so few, and how few that I'd even heard of. So I went to Blockbuster and I rented one of the few that I had heard of, which was Psycho.
Okay.
Which loved it. And then after that, I rented The Birds, which I also loved. And I remember when I rented that, my grandma was staying with us at that time. She refused to watch it because that movie scared her when it originally came out. And then from there, I saw 12 Angry Men and The Manchurian Candidate, Citizen Kane. And I was like, there's something really special going on here.
That's awesome. It sounds similar to even my own upbringing, classic rock, going to classic films. Psycho is a big one for me growing up. And I think my final question before we get into Gigi is, and this is just from us talking on Instagram and you following us pretty much since day one, is have you watched all the Best Picture winners before? Are you caught up to the list, or are you actually going through the journey like bits and pieces here and there?
I've seen most, probably 70 or 80 Best Picture winners.
Yeah, we'll have to give you access to our, what we call it, the sheet, the doc, our main doc with the entire listing, and this Psycho has literally organized everything perfectly and has all the information laid out. So.
Yeah, and you might have heard this story, and I'll repeat it again just for everyone who listens, but yeah, over the pandemic, like this was my pandemic project of like, I just want to watch all the movies. Then me and Jon talked, and it was like, we've always wanted to have a podcast, and this felt like a natural thing to talk about. So this is very specific, but it's been fun. It feels like almost a second film school, and I'm sure hearing the movies that you list off that you watched growing up, like that, even that's its own film school. So I think we're on the same page of like our love for old Hollywood and like the importance of it to today's movies and even music, theater, whatever you want to talk about,
Yeah.
So so let's jump into Gigi. And the structure we were going to have for this podcast was to go song by song, musical by musical number. So the first one is the intro with our character Henri, and that is "Thank Heaven for Little Girls." I'm going to let you guys start this off, and I'll interject. So, John, why don't you take this off?
I'll jump into this because this is a hot topic for some. We talked and opened the podcast here talking about taboo films, and whether you may not agree with a certain plot or certain character, there's still aspects of things to enjoy. And I think "Thank Heaven for Little Girls" is kind of a light, whimsical song without considering just the lyrics. I think when you break down the lyrics, you'll see that it's not as creepy as it sounds. I'm sure, Austin, you feel that same way. But it is kind of a joyful song. I think it feels a little different after you watch the film and go through the entire plot. But starting the film, it was a nice, light entrance into the world. I like how Henri is showing us into this world and its beautiful Parisian city. But Austin, tell me what you think about "Thank Heaven for Little Girls."
I agree with you that when you look into the lyrics, it's not as creepy as it seems. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's still a very creepy song.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, go ahead.
But I think that kind of gets into the weird thing about this film is that the song is undoubtedly creepy, but it's also one of the catchiest songs ever written.
I can't lie. I've been singing it ever since I've seen this movie.
Yeah, I this is where I struggle with because I jump into the movie immediately and being I think of the times that we're in and social consciousness just immediately being hit with an older white man being "Thank Heaven for Little Girls" is where I'm like, oh boy, what am I getting myself into? Like I remember first watching it. I was like, okay, I get it. 1958, younger girls, older man, like that's a relationship thing that happens. And but then when I got into it, and then just thinking about it more and more, I was like, is he talking about that he, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, or is he like, oh, thank heaven for the 8-year-olds because they're gonna grow up to be beautiful women? And that's where I'm like, okay, like that was my first red flag of this movie, where I get it, it's catchy and it's an old man who's presenting himself to be sweet, but then I'm like, well, this is also kind of horrifying, at least when I thought about it. So hearing your perspectives, I get it. That's a little catchy and whimsical and fun.
Yeah, because it starts off the movie. There's certainly a shock to it.
Yeah,
that I can understand if that shock doesn't wear off for the rest of the runtime because it's so out of the gate.
Yeah, it's very in your face. Like this movie is going to be about a young girl and young girls falling in love. And I think that I anticipated, okay, maybe there's a younger guy, that she could fall in love with, and like it's about her. But then the story, it kind of throws you for a loop. Also, and we'll get into is like she kind of goes to the side. Like Gigi, you see Leslie Caron, like she is almost like playing with them, which I know she's 16, but they're just playing around like in a field together.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'm expecting the story really to be the focus on her, but it gets away and shifts away to the male perspective and Gaston's perspective of the whole story. And that's where, again, that whole idea gets reinforced, thank heaven for little girls. It's like, should we be thanking heaven for young children?
But that's a great question, because this whole film kind of like is guided through Henri's point of view, and he's the one kind of guiding us into this world. So what did you guys think of that, the way he was kind of like showing us into the world, and why is it him in particular was the biggest question that I felt. Austin, what do you think?
I think it's him in particular because of the casting of Maurice Chevalier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're particularly familiar with his film work, but in the early sound years, he was like a huge movie musical star. And in his films, he would often direct address to the camera. And this is one of his first films back after a long hiatus. So I think they are kind of using that nostalgia of him being like a musical star narrating his own films, singing directly to camera to kind of be like, hey, Maurice Chevalier is back, and he's going to be our guide into this world and into this story.
So let me ask you, like, from a film standpoint, do you like it when the character does break that fourth wall? I mean, this is very breaking the fourth wall throughout this entire movie. And just the way he's presented, is that something you like in like other films when a character does that, or is that something that kind of takes you out of it? 'Cause for me, it does take me out of the movie for a hot second when a character is referencing what's going on like that.
I think that it all depends on how it's used, and I think here it's used rather well, because he's never like winking at a camera mid-scene. He's always just introducing the situation or just singing a song directly to camera. He's never like making snide remarks. He's not doing like a Jim look to the camera.
Yeah,
Right.
He's not Deadpooling it. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. It also bookends the film, right? He introduces us and then kind of takes us away and says, "That's it. Like, it's our fairy tale." Like, you can close the book at the end, and he's really joyful, and it's a really, I think, sweet and charming performance, even though he's singing about loving little girls. I think that song in general, if it was just about like loving children and the youthfulness of just nature and, you know, growing up, it would feel a lot different than it does.
Yeah.
But focusing it on women makes it rough.
Yeah, and then also throughout the movie, he's constantly surrounding himself by younger women, and you know the song he has with Gigi's grandmother, it obviously shows that he had a past with her and probably tons of other women, but he is still maintaining to this youthful idea, and I think that sometimes, and I think I keep on coming back to today's points of view, which me and Jon talked about in the beginning, that times do change, ideas do change, and people change, and the sentiments all around change. But then at the same time, he's still an older, like he has to be in his 70s at the time of this movie was made. So
I think he was 70 or about to reach 70.
Right. So I think, just in my head, like seeing that, you can't just help feeling like creepy old guy, younger woman, like where's the line there almost? But I also do understand love is love, but also at the same time, it's very creepy for an older man to be, constantly hounding after little girls, younger women.
Yes. What I will say about that is that the women that the film pairs him with they're not 5 or 6 or 7. They're like late 20s,
right.
Early 30s,
Sure.
Which, I mean, still is not great to have like a 70-year-old with a late 20s, but it's okay, or certainly more okay.
Yeah, I definitely, I definitely can hear that.
And where his character is coming from is that in the intro, just before he starts singing, he says there are some who do not marry and some who will not marry. He falls into the will not marry. He's a bachelor. He loves being a bachelor. Previous Maurice Chevalier films, he always plays like a suave playboy kind of character, and this kind of feels like what happens to that character once they're an older man.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved his relationship with Gaston, because it was this weird kind of bro-y, trying to show him the world, but he's a little odd the way he crosses the line sometimes. And we have the next song, which is It's a Bore with Gaston and Henri, and they're riding with this insane compositing in the background of them riding through the Eiffel Tower.
It's the lowest low-angle shot I've ever seen.
So, Austin, I'm curious, what do you think of this song in particular, and also some of the visuals? It really goes out there to kind of show off Paris.
Well, what I will say about the Eiffel Tower, and they even reference the Eiffel Tower, like how cool the Eiffel Tower is in the song. This movie takes place in 1900. And the Eiffel Tower, I think, was only built in the late 1880s or early 1890s. So the Eiffel Tower is still a relatively new thing. And so that's why he's so surprised when he's like, the Eiffel Tower doesn't excite me. Like to use an example from our childhood, Ben, I know we grew up in the same like New York suburb area.
Yeah.
Do you remember how big of a deal King Dakar was when it was built?
Yeah. Remember how big of a deal the Palisades Mall was when that was built? I definitely, I hear that, and it's really funny you pointed out, because there have been times in other movies that we've talked about where some trivia or note you'll find is like, well, they talked about this, but that didn't even happen until like 50 years later. So it is funny that is in there, because you probably would expect the Eiffel Tower to be like, oh my God, this new structure is here, and it's pretty fantastic. I do have to say though, and I've said the lowest low angle shot. So like that's part of like these musical bits and scenes that I have an issue with, is like they don't do enough coverage and they just do like one angle the entire time. So when it comes to like the musical aspect of these movies, there's no wow factor, there's no pizzazz to it. And then on top of that, I didn't find Gaston's like performance or the way he sings, it's very like it's spoken word almost. So that's where it loses me, because my musicals, the stuff I love, I want it to be big and grand, and this is very subtle with the musical aspect of the film.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with that. I mean, the constant, he's less singing and more just rhythmically speaking.
Right.
I think that's fair, though. I think it's a different artistic style, whether you enjoy it or not. Like you said, Ben, that's really up to you. I thought it was like a nice change of pace, and I think some of the lyricism is quite lovely and kind of cute and charming at times. But, yeah, it's kind of distracting visually, I think. I think while there's not much movement, they try to add all the movement and the crazy compositing and showing the Eiffel Tower in the background. I found it kind of like visually interesting, but not in a way where I was grounded within the story. I was more like, this is so crazy looking, like some of the birds compositing from Hitchcock, like you were talking about earlier. It's wild and visually interesting, but not in a way that I found was grounded in reality.
Yeah,
right.
And I think also, and there's other parts where I want to bring it up, is the cinemascope aspect of the movie, to have such a big frame and to not really use it. Like you could have, if it would have been one thing if they were in this carriage riding around singing, and the background was more level with them, and you see the streets of Paris, you see them actually going around, even if it was a composite of Paris, doing that. But instead you're looking up at the sky the whole time, and honestly you could have shot that on a nice older looking part of New York that it probably could have doubled as that to me. So, or even like London. So I don't know. I just, these technical aspects keep on coming back to me, and like how I feel about the movie, as well as the movie and the story aspect, the musical parts in the story. But the technical aspects of the movie totally takes me out of it, because Minnelli kicked ass in American in Paris. I don't know how you feel about that movie. We've never talked about it, but he like all the technical aspects of that movie are great. And then you get this, and it feels like it's two totally different directors approaching it.
Yeah, I do really like An American in Paris, and I do think that Vincent Minnelli is a great musical director, even here, or director of musicals, rather. Even here. He's also made The Bandwagon, which, great Fred Astaire movie, and also my favorite of his film, musical or non-musical, Meet Me in St. Louis. And I think the biggest thing that separates this film and with An American in Paris and The Bandwagon is that The Bandwagon has Fred Astaire, American in Paris has Gene Kelly. This is not a dance-centric movie. Both of those films are very much centered around, we are going to watch these amazing dancers dance. That's not what this movie is.
Well, I think that's a good transition to the next number, which is The Parisians, which is a Gigi number, and Gigi's played by Leslie Caron, and she's a great ballerina. You see her skills on full display. In American in Paris, like me and John were blown away by it. I'm not a dance person. I've seen like dance performances, like my little sister did dance, and completely bored by that. I've tried to get into it, but I appreciate
your little sister wasn't as good as Leslie Caron.
No, but what I'm saying is like the idea of dance as an art form has never really appealed to me, but in American in Paris it did. So like that was really refreshing and nice to have. And then knowing that the person that plays Gigi could have been, she has those talents, they didn't even use it. She barely even moves during her musical numbers is disappointing. So, and that goes back to the whole aspect of there's no wow factor in the musical numbers.
It is odd because it feels almost intentional that they cast her and have her sit for so much of the film. And it's odd because it is another MGM musical as well, so we've kind of come accustomed to it. And from our point of view, going through the years of these Oscars, it's kind of, we're going to think so much as if this were an American Paris, and we're going to compare it so much to that. But I think there is a difference in the two, right? And there's a difference in the genre, whether you want to have it to be all about dancing or combining the two, like Singing in the Rain. Everyone always says that's the greatest musical of all time, and I think it's so drastically different from this that people hate on this movie because of that. So, Austin, do you think musicals need dancing? Do you think it's necessary to create a great, stunning musical?
It certainly helps. I think that the lack of dancing, I certainly think, is a flaw in this film. But at the same time, if you did have a number where Leslie Caron was able to do everything that she's able to do, it would just make the lack of dancing in every other number stick out that much more.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. But to go like to the whole other end of the spectrum where you don't have it feels sort of lazy, you know? And the second movie that we talked about on the podcast, Broadway Melody, we really were down on it because of the lack of choreography. We'll give it like some wiggle room because it was from 1929 and not many people were making musicals like to the extent that like we know of it today. But at the same time, like it is 1958, I do expect some movement choreography. I don't think she needs to go crazy all over the place, but there's got to be something. I mean, and I do like the Parisians number a lot, but when her just walking around just in a garden yelling at statues doesn't like that, it still doesn't do enough for me. So I don't know how you guys felt even about like that, because that's like somewhat choreography, somewhat, you know, blocking and movement in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, for this number, they cut to so many different locations because it is Gigi kind of walking around Paris. So I guess choreography would be difficult to like have like all this choreography, well, traditional choreography within all these different spaces. They do a similar thing later on, which we'll get to at a different number. But yeah, I do think that she does a good job kind of like very poutily walking through everywhere, just kind of being like, I don't like this society. So I think that she does a great job with what she's given. But I mean, rewatching it now that I've seen An American in Paris, I've seen Lily, like knowing what Leslie Caron can do, it is a little frustrating that is the most that she is given.
Yeah, that's fair. I think in terms of dancing, I totally agree with that and feel that. I think in terms of an actual performance and acting performance, I think this is definitely a better performance from her than An American in Paris. And I know you like the movie better. I like the movie better, but do you agree with that, Ben?
Not really. And the other part of it, I'm trying to remember like how she didn't really sing that like too much in American in Paris. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but like even in this movie, they completely dubbed all of her singing. So coming to find out, they were dubbed with a singer, Betty Wan, and Caron was like shocked that she did all of this work only for them to just dub it over in the end, which I feel like that's a huge slap in the face. And
yeah,
I know
it is.
I know like in Disney like animations they always use a different voice because they want the big star, but that's like an animation and like you're physically seeing her, and I can appreciate that they sound work to have to dub it over and have to do all that all that work on it, but at the same time it's like why, like she's a really good talent, so like why misuse her like that? It just feels that again, like I go back to the sentiment of like Minnelli it felt like it was lazy, his approach to it. And I don't know if it was like MGM was like, well, here's a bunch of money, make another musical, we don't care, you're Minnelli, you'll make money off of this type of thing. Because from what I've read and research, it seems like this movie was put together fairly quickly from all aspects. So that's where I don't know if they were rushed or if he just was like, I don't give that much of a shit, I'm gonna make my money regardless, with this. So that's where the end product of it feels sort of, oh well, here you go, here's another musical.
Yeah, well, I mean, with her dubbing, it is certainly strange because Leslie Caron can sing, and she does have that great French accent. So it is kind of a wonder why they even chose to dub her in the first place. But on this CD version that I have here, they do have a couple bonus tracks with her original vocals in it, and she does sound good in it. Like, I wouldn't think you would need to replace her. But having said that, Betty Wand does sound better.
Interesting.
It's
Why is
a
that?
strange decision to make, but it improves the film overall. I guess to use a modern comparison, in the movie Her, Samantha Morton was originally the voice of the computer. And throughout the entire filming, that was the voice they used. And up until like they were in post production, they just felt something was missing, and they got Scarlett Johansson to replace her. Samantha Morton's a great actress, and I'm sure it sounded fine, but they just felt that there was a way that it could be improved.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. See, this is why we knew you'd be a great addition. You
I
own the
actually know-
CD. Like, this is amazing. I love that.
I own the CD. I own a DVD of it too.
Oh, hell yeah. The finest quality on DVD.
Are you going to get that 4K release too?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to spend 4K on a money of this subject.
All right, let's move on to the next kind of tiny. Go ahead.
Before we move on to the next number, I do think that there's a very interesting comparison between It's a Bore and the Parisians.
Okay.
I think these two songs form a very similar purpose, where it's getting out the idea that both Gaston and Gigi do not like the conforms of the society that they are within. It's a Bore is Gaston saying, like, all this stuff that you think is cool and is exciting, it's not really for me.
Mhm.
And Gigi, this is basically the same thing. Like, I don't understand the Parisians. I don't understand why you all care about these material things. It's not her bag. And we also get a similar comparison where Gaston is singing it with his uncle, who's kind of like his mentor figure. She sings this just after leaving her aunt, who's similarly teaching her how to be a proper society woman.
Wait,
So we're
I want to. Well, you finish what you were saying. Sorry for interrupting, but I do want to get back to something.
I was pretty much done. So go on.
So you said her aunt to be a proper high society woman. So that's another part of this movie that completely loses it for me, because they nicely say she's trained to be a courtesan, to be up in high society. She's really just getting pimped out. Let's just call a spade a spade. They are literally pimping out a 16-year-old girl so she can sleep with an older socialite, so that way their family is more highly regarded.
Yep.
All right,
It's not great. Not great.
I need to put that out there because that's the other aspect of it. Like,
It's-
after seeing thank heaven for little girls, thank heaven that Gigi is being done up and being taught how to put herself into society, which is just, it's disturbing. And that, again, like, that's where it loses it for me. And that's where, like, you make a great comparison between It's a Bore and the Parisians. And I really like that idea, but then I'm just like, and she's getting pimped out, and thank heaven for little girls. Like, that's where I'm like, okay, it takes myself out of the movie, and it adds to my feelings of it.
I think that makes perfect sense, and BuzzFeed feels the same way. This is their lowest ranked film.
I saw that.
And that led to controversy, and there's even an article that I read that was very actually well written from a feminist point of view, who loves Gigi and like how much she thinks that this film is criminally underrated, and she looks at this as kind of a very feminist film where Gigi is trying to break the norms and break society.
Yeah. And I certainly see it from that perspective. I mean, the reason why she's getting quote unquote pimped out, I feel like that's a strong way of saying it. She's basically she's basically being taught, like, her family is not good enough for the upper class to marry, but they are good enough that they could take her as a mistress.
Which is none of which we agree with, but in 1900 Paris.
No, I'm
fair.
Yeah, I'm not defending that at all.
It still blows my mind. It still blows my mind.
What's really interesting is that this is 1900 Paris, but this is one of the most popular films of 1958. 9 Academy Awards, and it's beloved at the time. So there's clearly people are relating to this even in 1958. Whether that's a good thing or something we can like further dig into, I'm sure there's so much we can say about that, and whether the culture in America still kind of reflected that kind of notion of kind of trying to punch above your weight class and try to get money almost from the upper class. Not that I feel like this film is truly fully representing that, but I think there's something in that, and it's kind of disturbing, maybe in a way, that in 1958 this was kind of an agreeable notion, but
we couldn't just had like a a young woman in her 20s. Like maybe she like worked as like a housekeeper. Maybe, why couldn't she be the person who centered this around instead of a 16-year-old girl?
That's called Made in Manhattan with J-Lo, and that exists already.
Great movie. Can we do a podcast about that? But let's get to the next song. Jon.
We're talking about the gossip.
One more thing I want to say about the Parisians.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things in any number is how she doesn't really pronounce the R in Parisians. It's Parisians.
Parisians, yeah.
Just a little touch that I love.
I love the accents in this film. It's just the dumb American in me who loves a good accent. I love it. And the gossips, we get like a crowd of accents, as you know, we have Gaston walking through with his girlfriend at the time, and everyone's kind of like judging them in this bar or this restaurant. And what I found a little bit weird about this scene is that we're kind of like hearing their whispering as Gaston's walking through with his date, and then all of a sudden it kind of like cuts to silence. And it was honestly like so jarring for me that it just kept taking me out of the film, because it just felt like the film wasn't properly mixed. And it kind of feels that way throughout this film for me, is where the audio is a little iffy and there's like background noise missing from some scenes and some like, you know, glue to kind of tie all the audio actually together. But yeah, there's not too much to say. Do you guys have anything to say about this quick little, the gossips as they're walking in the restaurant?
Well, on the note of there's no background, I think that's certainly an issue with musicals of this era.
Definitely.
Is that there wasn't like now, like if we have a musical number in a film and like someone drops a fork in the background, you'll hear that, because that could very easily be added in.
Sure.
Whereas back then they would just kind of like throw in the musical track.
Yeah. And I think if I read correctly that the music wasn't finished by the time, or they weren't singing directly, they were trying to sing along with the music, right? They weren't actually singing on set, right?
They had recorded like piano demos of all the songs with
right.
all the cast singing, including Leslie Caron. They had her vocals in when they were filming, so they were filming to the piano demos. All the orchestrations were added in afterwards, and a lot of times they actually had to re-record the vocals because they had found a better idea for it.
Yeah, and that's pretty common practice. I remember hearing of like the most recent Les Mis in 2011, 2012, like they would just wear earpieces with someone like playing the piano along with them, and that was recorded live, if I'm not mistaken, with that one. But yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before. This movie feels like they were building the track as the train was going 100 miles an hour down it. And it shows. But actually, talking about the gossips, this is actually one of the musical numbers I liked, and I did like the staging of everybody whispering, everyone's like talking about Gaston, and I like that because that visually, I could see that on a Broadway stage.
Yeah.
I can see how that is played out, and like that was cool. And also, I forget the name of the restaurant right now, but that was like a real restaurant with all the mirrors.
Yeah,
and like so.
Maxine's.
Yeah, Maxine's, right. So like that was a cool setting. I definitely. Like that I appreciated. That was a good number for me because I liked how that was staged and that added to the story itself.
Yeah, and with the staging of that number, it's especially complicated because of all the mirrored walls within the restaurant.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of a miracle that you don't see any of the crew within the mirrors.
Definitely. Yeah,
it's almost as if like they had panned any more to the right, you would have seen something.
Yeah, I think
they got it right on.
I think I read somewhere that they use like suction cups to put like the lights on, so at least like that would like blend in because obviously you can have like all those stands. And you would have seen those immediately.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, I can definitely appreciate that technical aspect, like that you didn't see the camera in the mirrors.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite part of Minnelli's directing, or if we can credit him this in particular, or if it's just the set designer, but how packed the frames are. While we don't have a lot of movement and dancing, the interiors I find are filled with life, like filled with really bright colors. Like the aunt's house is all red and it's very vibrant, or is the grandma's house? The grandma's house is so vibrantly red.
I do want to comment on that because that was actually, I don't love all that red. There's a lot of red.
I love that red so much.
It's so much red, and that goes also back to my issue with the CinemaScope use, is because you have these like, all right, it's all red. Put that aside, but then like sometimes there'll be like an object in the middle of the screen that like cuts it in half. Like in the grandma's house, there's just a lamp that just hangs in the middle. That's like it's like too much in the foreground almost that it cuts off like the background of the apartment, and like that aspect I didn't love. There's a few other times where it's just directly in the middle, like the foreground. There's something there, but the action is more in the middle towards the back of the frame. So it just feels like a misuse. And in the last movie we talked about, on the bridge on the River Kwai, like David Lean masterfully put stuff in the background of the frame that like made sense to the story, but let the, you know, what's in front of it actually be what's going on. So like I love that use of CinemaScope, whereas this feels like, all right, CinemaScope on the pedestal, do the scene. And I know there's a lot of long takes, and I can appreciate that, but for using something that's so like special to how to visually represent something, it feels again like, well, we have this technology, and just hit record, and that's it. That's all we got to do.
Yeah, I do think that Minnelli is certainly a more superficial director than David Lean was, and didn't have quite the eye for framing that Lean had.
Absolutely.
However, with this film in particular, what the production and costume designer Cecil Beaton did is just kind of throw as many beautiful things as possible into the frame, and I think that makes up for the lack of dynamic camera work. Is that even though the camera's not moving, there's always something great to draw your eye to.
But does that then also take away from the story itself, almost, if you're so visually distracted?
I mean, there certainly is a potential that was lost by doing that, but part of Minnelli's whole directing style is watching people perform. Like, not as much in American Paris, but in a lot of his other films, it's like very wide shots, very long takes where you can see, you know, the full body move. You can see the whole room. And, you know, if you were never able to like go to a Broadway show, this is kind of as close to that as you'd be able to get.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I really do like how jam-packed everything is. It's cluttered, it's crazy and wild. And I think that kind of says something about Parisians and the life they have there and how much they care about art and society and friendships more than actual work most of the time.
It also adds to the idea of what a material society it is.
Exactly, yeah. It is very much in line with kind of what the film is about as well.
But is that the Parisian society, or is that American society, or is that just society in general?
I think that is what this movie thinks of 1900 Paris.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. A good way to think about it. So what the next number we have is She Is Not Thinking of Me.
Yeah, so we have, following the same scene in Maxims, we have them sitting down together, and it's maybe one of my favorite moments where we have Louise Jourdan, who's singing to himself, and again we have almost a fourth wall break because we have voiceover in a way where he's kind of singing to himself. I love that aspect. I thought it was really charming and unique for a musical. You know, he's trying to bottle in his thoughts, and then eventually he sings as well during the song. So Austin, what do you think of She Is Not Thinking of Me?
I really like that number, and I think that gets us further into Gaston's head. Because the woman is not excited to be with Gaston. She's just there to be excited with a wealthy man and to be a part of this restaurant, to be a part of this scene. So he's saying, like, she's very excited, but it's not because of me.
Yeah. It's a funny, like, goofy, and I found like the humor in this film to be like my favorite aspect. I found myself like laughing throughout this song with the way the rhyming throughout the song and how goofy it is and how ridiculous the woman he is acting in the restaurant and clearly like flirting with other men at the same time. I thought it was goofy and charming. What about you, Ben?
I think that's, and I hate to always be the Debbie Downer, but like again, it just goes back to like why couldn't they have had him like stand up and do like everyone freezes, but he's walking around the restaurant, kind of like singing about like why she isn't thinking of him, like do the same thing, but he's moving around, like because at the end of the movie he's not singing, but he's walking around in these cool, backdrops of Paris. So it's I don't know. I feel like again, there could have been more. He could have been done. There could have been something more to it.
With this scene in particular, I think that the staticness of it actually works to its benefit. That even if the rest of the numbers had like this crazy camera work and choreography, this one should still be shot the way it is. Because Gaston does not want to be there. He's like a little kid that's like frustrated that his mom took him somewhere. So he's just sitting in his chair. He's stewing. He's singing through his teeth, which is a great thing that they did here.
So talking about Gaston, like, right, he wants to get like, do you think he wants to get out of society? Because at the same time, when he does finally get to romance with Gigi and take her out, he goes to the same exact places. He does the same exact things he would with the women that he's so fed up with that he finds boring. So it's like, what do you want, Gaston? Because it feels like it's trying one of those stories where, oh, I don't want to be involved in high society, but I really do want to be part of high society because I get all these benefits from it.
I'll dig into that more when we get there plot-wise, but I do think that there's a very good reason why they have it set up that way. And they kind of set up some subtle things in this number. Like the date that he has, played by Ava Gabor, all the things that she's doing at the restaurant, like his cigar, like pouring the coffee, that's all things that Gigi will later be taught to do. She's it's kind of showing us this is the mold that they are trying to fit Gigi within.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And for me, it's kind of like a balance of I'm finding kind of humor and there's a charm to this musical number in the scene, but on the dramatic side, I just don't care about Gaston's character and his plot because I just don't really find it very interesting about a man who's trying to find like the perfect woman. It's not really like the most interesting dramatic plot, and I think that's fair. I don't think the film is trying to be any more heightened than simply a kind of beautiful dramatic musical while also being a love story. It's not trying to be a drama and it's not trying to be that dramatic, but this scene kind of, I just want more from Gaston. Like, I want to learn more about him. Like, what does he actually like? We hear so much about what he hates, and he acts very much more like a child than Gigi does, and I think that's definitely intentional, the way he acts more like a child most of the film than even Gigi. So it's both I love and I hate at the same time, and I kind of feel that way consistently throughout this movie.
Yeah, the first couple times I watched this movie, Gaston did kind of get on my nerves a little bit.
So I think plot wise, after this, this is where he breaks up with the girlfriend, and then she attempts suicide, which leads me to the next thing I don't like about this movie, that everyone celebrates Gaston because he had his first suicide. So I'll leave it at that. Whoever wants to pick it up from there, but we are now celebrating suicide.
John, what are your thoughts on attempted suicide?
Well, it's clearly a joke that is not something we can relate to now. But I have to imagine 120 years ago, there's something we're missing here. Some joke about...
Yeah, we all hate on the mentally ill. Screw your mental health.
Well, I don't know if this is about mental health. Because the way that it happens is she's caught seeing another man,
right?
The ice skating instructor we see later on, and they have like a very public falling out, and so she attempts suicide, and our reaction is what? But then they ask, like, how did she do it? The same as they always do it, with an insufficient amount of poison. So she purposely poisoned herself enough to not die, but also to like go through the thing of, oh no, my lover caught me with another. I have to go through this convention of attempting suicide, even though we all know that I'm not actually going to die from this. So when they're saying it's his first suicide, that's kind of what they mean. Like, oh, he got a girl to attempt suicide, even though we all know she's not really attempting suicide.
Yeah, like in the plot, it says her fake attempted suicide. So it's trying to be a joke of the time to be like, wow, he's that charming.
I'm not saying the joke works.
Yeah, that still does not fly. Like that still is like, because they're literally toasting, like Gaston and Henri are literally toasting to this idea. I don't know that, like, you can say, oh, it was only a little bit of poison. Oh, she was only a little bit sad, and she was only trying to get a little bit of attention to her. It's still an attempted suicide. So again, like, that's where I'm like, what the fuck? But to also go back to them, like, finding out that she was cheating on Gaston, how ridiculous is the two of them putting on like long coats and like what's the name of that hat? Putting on hats and like goggles and like, oh, they're not gonna see us now as we like obviously look through the window at her. Again, like, that's part of the story where, if that was the only part of the story and you told me, well, it was more of an attention thing and it was like a fake suicide, maybe I would be less upset about it. But again, like, that's compounded with every other thing we've heard before, and every other misstep from the technical aspects before, where it's just like, oh, come on, like now we're dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain give and take when it comes to like judging older art by today's moral standards.
But how much can I give?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's only so much one can take that I totally understand.
Well, if faking suicides or joking about suicide isn't enough, we can move on to underage drinking.
Oh,
with
yes.
The night they invented champagne, which we have Gigi trying champagne for the first time. Austin, what are your thoughts about that?
About her drinking champagne?
And the night they invented champagne.
Yeah, the
song.
musical number.
Well, I love how before it starts, like, Gigi clearly wants to drink, and her grandmother's like, no, what are you talking about? And then when she turns her back, Gaston kind of slyly slides his glass over to her. I think it's just a very nice moment in between them. Like, you can have a little sip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I agree with that. I definitely, because I've had that older family member who's like, okay, you can have like a little bit of this. So I don't have much issues, but I do want to branch off this a little bit where it's like, where's her mother? Where's Gigi's mother? There's this whole subplot that her mom sings in the opera, and you hear her singing, but you never see her. And it feels like they could have used a scene where, towards the end of the film, where she's dealing with these emotions of Gaston, that her mom finally appears and has like a talk with her about love and men and this whole idea of what she's going through. So what do you think of like the lack of Gigi's mom just being there?
Honestly, I think that they could have just done completely without the mother character.
Exactly.
They have it as a recurring joke that she's like a bad opera singer, and they have her practicing scales, and then they just shut the door. I don't think it's a funny enough joke to have it recur as many times as it does. But yeah, because it's certainly her grandmother that raises her, and the mother never makes an on-screen appearance.
Right.
That it's just a strange thing that they even included
it just leaves me with more questions than it does like that. I like, oh, like satisfied by that joke and satisfied by that subplot even being there.
Yeah, you would feel like Gigi would be kind of inspired by her mother, while her grandmother's saying, like she wasted her time, she should be doing what you're doing, like finding the right upper class man. She instead wasted her time and now is barely even on stage for the opera. So I thought there would be an element for Gigi to kind of like maybe even go out and find a career, or even like mention it slightly, Well,
I mean, with your mentioning that, it's making me think that maybe they include her as like a cautionary tale of what happens if you don't embed yourself in this society. That you can just be cast off in a bedroom somewhere practicing for the opera, where you're in the background of the chorus that's already in the background.
Ben, what do you feel about that?
So the reason that her grandmother and her aunt are like so insistent on teaching her the ways of high society is so that, because they already failed with the mother, so like Gigi is like their last chance to keep the family going.
Was this Star Wars where like, oh, we'll take the grandson because your grandfather fucked up and went to the dark side? is that what we're...
Gigi is a template for Star Wars.
Is that what we're talking about right now?
And then Palpatine with Rey, he's trying to continue the tradition,
Oh my god.
It's all
It all makes sense
all
now.
Connects.
Oh, now I get it. Now I get it.
Yeah, for me, the night they invented champagne is not a very memorable song. Honestly, it's one I kind of forget.
Totally disagree.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Well, tell me, Austin.
Wait, is this a banger that Austin goes to when he goes into the car?
Yeah, tell me.
100%.
There we
yes,
go.
Wow. Okay, let's hear it. Start singing.
The song is fantastic. It's so joyful, and it could also just be like taken out of context of the musical, because there's no like names or situation. It's just that like we're so happy that when they thought of champagne, the celebratory drink, they must have been thinking of times like this. This feeling that we have must have what they had in mind for this occasion.
That's a nice way of putting it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wish I felt that way, Austin.
I wish I had Austin's interpretation every time I watch a movie we don't love.
And the lead up to this song is like Gaston is just passing by to say hello on his way to another public engagement that he doesn't want to go to. And then they're like, well, why don't you stay and have dinner with us? And he's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to have a better time if I eat with you guys than eating with all of them. So this is the song culminating their great time. You know, like Gigi cheated at cards so that she could get invited to go on a vacation with him in Treville. And so this is him kind of realizing, I'm going to have a much better time doing that. Let's celebrate this occasion with even her drinking champagne. She could have a glass. And this is that song.
That I love that, and I love that idea. And then but it does make me want more. Like, why is Gaston so entrenched in their family? You know, and it feels like because they also have the subplot of Henri and Gigi's grandmother clearly having a past together. Mm-hmm. So where, like, do you wish that they had more of, like, why is Gaston so involved with this family, especially knowing because he had to have known the stuff about his uncle and her grandmother, but that doesn't seem to be relevant at all to why he's there.
Yeah, I certainly, I mean, it would certainly help a lot. I mean, get invested just to know specifically Gaston's background with the rest of the family. We know Honoré used to have a relationship with her. They mentioned that early on. But even then, I don't know why Gaston even knows them.
Right.
It's a very strange thing to not include into the story.
It almost feels like that if they were going to use the mother, like the mother should have been the love interest. Like that, I expected that, honestly, the first time I watched the movie. They're like, okay, we're not seeing the mom, but the mom will come out and she'll fall in love with Gaston. And like, and the movie's about Gigi not only having like this male figure that she obviously has a close relationship, but now she gets to have that forever. And like, that was a missing piece in her life. But it went the other way with that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there may be some explanation of how these two families know each other, and that may come from the grandmother and Henri, where they share a beautiful song together called I Remember It Well. And this may be my favorite song, specifically because I feel like it's a mature song, and not just about people that are mature, that have seen a lot in life, but it feels like a song that's just not simply about love. It's looking back and remembering things fondly, but it has that more mature look on life. And I just found it really charming. And these two clearly have a history together. She may have been Gigi's age when Henri had a relationship with her, and maybe that's kind of continued and carry on. And that's how these two families know each other, just trying to pass on kids to each family and either or from both sides. But Austin, what did you like or did you not like about I Remember It Well?
The thing that I do like about I Remember It Well is I think it adds a lot of depth to Honoré's character, because he's chasing some girl like he's always doing, but then he hears a familiar laugh and he turns around and it's the grandmother that we know that they used to date, and he abandons the other girl and he goes towards her, and they converse talking about their past relationship, and they reveal that not only did they date, but he was going to propose to her, got scared of getting married, so he cheated on her with another girl. She found out and broke everything off. So it's kind of a window into the life that he almost had. I think it would have been more dramatically fulfilling if there's a sense that he still wanted that life and misses that opportunity, but that's not really there. I think he's kind of happy with the decision that he made.
He's thanking heaven for little girls.
Yeah.
God. I think the staging of this musical number is really good. I love the sunset fading behind them. And now I'm going to bring up the same sentiment I brought up with every other musical number, is like, they could have been dancing a little bit. There could have been, like, like with An American in Paris, they go, like, literally the last 17 minutes is them going through each like almost the movie again, and different scenes and settings. And it feels like they could have done that. They could have done on a bunch of sound stages, you know, them going through, having like younger versions of themselves, like just miming the acts that they're singing about. And I feel like that could have added more to it. And so this is another musical number where I do wish there was more choreography. I do wish there was more. It looks nice and beautiful with the sun setting and how they were able to do that. Probably in a studio space is how they got it. Still, though, I just wish there was more to it. It just wasn't enough just to have.
I mean,
you know, them
with the choreography in this scene, in their defense, it is a musical number between a 60-year-old and a 70-year-old.
Right, and I'm not saying they have to be Gene Kelly like tap dancing all over the place, but there could have been some moving and walking around. There
added a cane work, you know.
Yeah, John just spinning a little cane.
Spinning a little cane.
Yeah, so that's again like where I wish there was more, but I do like the sequencing that they had before this number with Gigi and Gaston and Treville, riding on the donkeys on the beach. They're playing tennis together, and Gigi is going all over the place, and that's juxtaposed with the other socialite woman who's just standing there playing tennis. So I like that, and like that added a little bit of fun for me into the film. But then I still get lost in the musical aspects because I do want more, and just the idea keeps on coming up for me in all these numbers.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I totally get that. No, I'm just saying I agree with him in a lot of that, especially with this number.
Yeah, I really like this number, and I felt like it was one of the most relatable scenes for me in terms of just a relationship and a dynamic. And, my girlfriend and I will look back and remember something, but we'll completely remember it differently, or one aspect will be very different. And there's a really adorable kind of like moment they have where they're trying to like remember their first date, and they're just completely on a different page,
Yeah, they don't remember the details, but they remember the emotions that they felt.
Exactly.
Which is kind of what's really worth remembering.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I wish that came through more in the movie, because that's a beautiful statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So the plot of the movie, in terms of musical numbers, we kind of like lose it a little bit. So I guess now we can kind of talk about.
Well, one thing I do want to say about I Remember It Well, because Jon seems to really like this song. On a musical level, this is probably my least favorite song in the film.
Oh, so this comes on the CD, you're like, skip, or you're like, all right, I'll listen to it, or...
Sometimes I'll listen to it just because it flows nicely with everything else, but yeah, this one's kind of a skip.
Okay. Which, I love that, because this is like very like plot information driven.
Story-wise,
exactly.
Like on an outline, this song works better than any other song in the film.
Exactly.
But as a song, like it's fine.
And that comes from someone who's listening to the CD in their car too, which is such a different like perspective and undertaking. Like it probably feels so different just listening to song after song instead of watching the whole film.
Yeah, I bought the CD after seeing the movie a second time, and like listening to it, I did not remember I Remember It Well.
All right, well I think that's totally fair. So going back, so the story kind of the music kind of stops for a little bit, and this is where I use my crass wording of the pimping of Gigi, the pimping out of Gigi, because that's essentially what this movie then does become for the next 20-ish minutes, where all it is just Gigi learning how to be a courtesan, to be in high society, her aunt constantly teaching her these things, and even though Gigi sort of is okay with like accepting that like that's what's happening, she also gives off a vibe of, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing a number of the things like smelling the cigars.
Yeah, she doesn't understand the Parisians.
She doesn't
understand it.
And what's the bird that she eats with all the bones? I was looking that
I think
up.
It's like andalade.
Yeah,
it's actually I actually think it's illegal to eat now.
Yeah,
wow. But
I think when I was looking at it, the traditional way of eating it is to put like a napkin over your face so you're not looking at what you're eating, which maybe you shouldn't be eating it in general then.
I mean, that kind of only goes to show the ridiculousness of what they're having her go through and what they're teaching her.
So, okay, so you bring that up. So like for you as you're watching the movie, are you like, what's your mindset at this point of the film? Are you into it because you do enjoy the music and the musical, or are you leaning towards, well, this is just ridiculous and that's why this is fun to watch?
I mean, kind of both. I do think that the music in this movie is kind of what makes it a very watchable movie. I think otherwise it's like a fine, okay movie. But if it were, I know that there's a film version of this that is not a musical, and outside of comparison, I have no interest in watching that, because for me, the musical aspect is what sets this apart.
Interesting.
Okay. I'm gonna do a very me thing, and in a talk about a classic Hollywood movie, I'm gonna mention Brian Eno.
Do it.
It's not an exact quote, but someone asked him about like working on other people's music and what his approach is as a music producer to other people's lyrics. And he said that as long as the lyrics don't make the song stupid, he doesn't really care. I think that's kind of what is going on here. The movie is not atrocious outside of the songs, so it's fine. It's a workable movie. Like, it makes it worth it for the songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I don't think I don't think anyone's watching Gigi for the plot. I also don't think anybody like is really listening to Coldplay or Berlin era Bowie for the lyrics. You're listening to it for the music, for the melodies, for the voices.
okay.
I think that's fair, but then what do you say to it winning Best Picture? I know this is kind of like a later conversation, but Best Picture should represent more than just like a light, fun time, right? In your opinion?
For the most part, yes. I think it winning has a lot to do with simply just like Cecil Beaton is really the MVP of this movie, designing both the costumes and the sets
Yeah.
for this. Just a massive undertaking, and he knocked it out of the park. I think that plus the songs is what makes this such an enjoyable movie. And given the other films nominated for Best Picture, I mean, I won't say the phrase yet, but I understand why this won.
Okay. It's just like, not to always be like the opposite of what you guys are saying, but it is like the reason for us even talking about all these movies is for the story, for the technical stuff, and to only like put like a tip of the cap because of the production design just isn't enough. Like, there's so many great movies that look good but plot wise don't really work, and that's where like when talking about this movie and trying to fit it in this this group of Best Picture winners, it feels so such an outlier because it doesn't give that much of a shit about the plot, because it's just, well, here's an okay visual with music that everyone was into. It may not be the best music, but everyone's into it, and that's why it won. It feels just like a populist kind of pick rather than the smart. Well, because it feels like, especially nowadays, like the Best Picture winner does try to be a little more smart about it, and maybe recent memory, like Green Book is not the best example of that because that's like a more recent winner, but most of the other Best Picture winners do follow that. I
mean, Coda I would put in a similar category where I don't think from a filmmaking standpoint it's that great a film, but it's a very good film and a very enjoyable film.
Well, I think like Well, I think like, and that's actually a really good example, because I agree, like it's not Lord of the Rings, it's not like even Parasite, where Parasite does so many great technical stuff, but it has a really heartwarming and emotional story to it. But and at the same time, to compare it like to this film with like what Gigi's trying to do with the CinemaScope aspect, like Coda knows, well, this isn't going to be a cinematographer's film. This is going to be a story-driven plot. It's going to be the acting that drives it. Yeah. Whereas Gigi,
it's a movie about that's like, we have a good script and we have a good cast. This is a movie that's like, we know that we can look pretty and we have great songs.
Right, and we know like everyone's gonna go see this movie, and again that goes for the whole populist idea, which
wait, the Oscars voted for a populist film?
Well, I've said this before.
Hang on.
I've said this in the past that actually big box office movies did used to win these awards.
Yeah.
Which I think that was like the 80s is probably where that changed a little bit. But regardless,
jumping back into the music.
These are the tangents I love. And
let's talk about the titular song, Gigi, sung by Louise Jourdan. You know, we have him kind of like contemplating. He's annoyed. He's angry. He's calling Gigi so many different names, a baby, and of course rhyming every single one. To me, this is like the most frustrating song. It may be even worse than Thank Heaven for Little Girls for me, honestly, because he's talking about such a young girl and he's so frustrated and he's so will they, won't they, back and forth that I'm just so over it, I think, by this point in the film. So hearing him talk about her being a child while we clearly know he's attracted to her and wants her, it's frustrating.
Well, I don't think he realizes that he's attracted to her or he wants her until this scene.
Yeah, he's fighting it in this scene is kind of what it is, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone else is kind of like grooming Gigi to like fill this role, and he doesn't see any of that. He's just like, oh, she's just like fun kid that I have a great time with.
Yeah.
But he realized in that moment, like, she's growing up. I think I have feelings for her.
Which we've all may have been in that scenario.
Younger girl? Waiting for
Not younger girl, but all been in the scenario where you have a friend, you know someone, and maybe once you hang out with them, once you know them more, maybe your feelings just change over time.
Well, John, that's why Austin is here, so he can witness. I've been trying to secretly hold this off, but to you, I have feelings.
You got to get on one knee, Ben, before you ask that. But I think it's...
I would get on one knee, but I have a standing desk. So
yeah, I get that. It sounds like you like this song definitely more than both of us, Austin.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of the best songs in the film. I do think it has a great melody, and I'm not totally sure why this was the song they chose to nominate from it. But I still think that it works. It's him. It's the realization of his feelings.
Yeah, so why don't... let me ask this question now, and then we can answer it when we do get to the best song talk in the Oscar part of this podcast. Is what song would you have picked? So think about that, and we can get back to that later when we do talk about the Academy Awards. So going to the next number, another Henri number. I'm glad I'm not young anymore.
You know, it kind of wraps up his character, right? So it's a nice little charming thing to see. He's seeing the frustrations that Gigi and Gaston are going through. I think it's necessary. You know, you need to have him kind of give one last outing. Like you said, Austin, I wish it kind of tied back into the grandmother. Maybe they become a couple. Maybe he kind of even hints to the fact that they could be a couple or he could settle down, but it doesn't fit his character, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is kind of him realizing that he made the right decision of being a bachelor, because he sees all like the stress that everyone else is going under, and he's like, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. Like, it's not my worry. I'm glad I'm not young enough where that's still a worry for me.
How do you feel about that, Ben?
It's fine. I don't know. It's not really a number where I'm like, Henri, you are kind of disgusting, but it's like a fine number, and I think it's also just a part in the story where, because this, I don't know, in terms of like runtime left, there's probably got to be like 20-ish minutes left of the movie. So at this point, I've already been subjected to all the other things that I didn't like. So it's really hard to then be like, oh, well, this is fine. Like, this is good, because I'm already disgusted by most of the other things.
Yeah, if you're not into the rest of the movie, this is a song I can imagine where you're just like, get on with it.
Yeah. Please end.
Yeah. Please figure this plot out. And then we get to say a prayer for me tonight, but like, and that's a good number, but still at the same time, like what happens between Gigi and Gaston pretty much right after the song is sung is like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Plot wise, it's like Gaston, like, make a decision or say something, but without, like, the filmmakers are like, but we're not going to have him say anything. He's just going to react.
Yeah, this is like her preparing for the night, getting ready. And I think some people, this is like kind of very different for some people, whether they see it as her being scared for the night, just nervous. And some people have even gone to the lengths of calling this her being like prepared to be to losing her virginity, prepared to be raped essentially tonight, which is, I mean, very intense language to use.
I think that's pushing it.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely pushing it. But, you know, people have very harsh feelings about this film, whether one side or the other. Yeah. But yeah, Austin, tell me what you think.
Well, if I remember correctly, right before this scene, Gaston is ready to make Gigi his mistress. Like, he's like, she'll have like a house, she'll have a car, she'll have all these nice things. But the key is that they won't be married. She is his mistress. And I'm trying to remember the plot now. It's been a few weeks since I have seen the film.
Yeah, that's pretty much like it is what happens. It's like, yeah, she'll have all this, but he doesn't make that but I'll marry her type of thing, because I feel like he's not even thinking about it that way. I think maybe he's like, well, I'll take her out for a test run, and then I'll let you know what I think about her after.
Is the test run before or after she says has the speech about not wanting to like just be tossed aside when she's too old for him?
That was before, because when she says all that, he kind of has that. He's like, oh, okay, like she can make this decision on her own. That it's not just like a business deal between me and her grandma and her aunt. Like this, like she's actually making this decision for herself, which is like it puts a lot of agency in Gigi's character, and that's good. But at the same time, you know, to point out like how many other 16-year-old girls are like, oh my god, I would totally go marry or go date X, you know, musician, you know, pop star.
Well, it's not just. Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that Gaston's like a famous bachelor.
Right.
He's in all the tabloids. He's a successful businessman. And she knows him personally to be a fun person that she enjoys spending time with.
He's so good that he gets people to fake their suicide. Like, he's that infamous. And then he's so famous that even gets written in the paper and talked about all around Paris as well.
By the way, how great are those drawings that they have?
Oh, for the parties, like that's really good, and that goes back to it feels like an American in Paris again,
yeah.
Where I like those aspects, and I like how the story is told through the newspapers, through these like extravagant invitations and posters for these dances and parties and whatnot, and that's all fine and good, but again, like, it's completely overshadowed by the plot and the other, you know, aspects of this movie. So it's I know, like, I want to appreciate it, but it's hard to appreciate that stuff.
A subtle thing they do that maybe will help you appreciate that is they have. I mean, we've seen Gigi wearing gloves before, and we have her gloves turning the pages of it. And then at the end of that sequence, we see that Gigi is the one that is reading. So we know that she is aware of and possibly even interested in all his dating exploits. So she's certainly aware of the lifestyle and is interested enough that she continues to read about it.
So using that word interested, so is it interest in just Gaston as a friend, or is it interest as a romantic? Because I don't think that's... I would lean more towards the former, that, oh, well, it's just Gaston, I just want to know what's going on, rather than, oh my god, I'm in love with him and I hate every girl that talks to him.
I don't know if I'd say, and I hate every girl that talks to him. Well, maybe, because she does kind of hate every girl that does talk to him. But yeah, I mean, maybe they could have included another song similar to Gigi for her called Gaston. But...
And I mean, this whole movie, I think, could have just been retitled Gaston versus Gigi, just because of the way of the perspective and who is mostly taking up the screen time of this.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because we can wrap up the plot here with, we have Gigi and Gaston going on a date. I think it's back to Maxim's and...
Yeah, back to Maxime's.
Maxime's, yeah, the same restaurant, and we're getting everyone with their eyes on them. You know, everyone's watching them. He seems very annoyed while she's trying to do everything perfect and be the perfect partner for him. Austin, how do you feel about this scene with him kind of feeling anxious while they're on a date? How do you feel about it?
And gifts her a really nice bracelet too.
Yes, of course, that's important.
He gives her a gorgeous bracelet, which she's very thankful for. But then we see her going through all the things that she's been taught throughout the movie. And just like in the prior scene in Maxime's, where the other woman went through all these same things, he's not having a great time. And we even hear that She's Not Thinking of Me music in the background. Like, that is the score playing underneath the scene. And part of the reason why he freaks out and like yanks her out of the restaurant and throws her into an apartment is because he's like, this is not the woman that I thought you were. I liked you for all the exact opposite reasons. And me bringing you into this world as a mistress is making you into someone I don't want to be with.
So is it someone that he wants to be with romantically, or just that I don't like this version of Gigi, I just wanted the fun time, my friend type of Gigi?
I think that, I mean, because he knows that she's been given lessons, and when he returns to the apartment, he's like, is this what you've been teaching her? So it's not like, oh, I only want the fun Gigi. It's, he knows that this is not the authentic her. And if he like keeps going with her as his mistress, that is, you know,
that's not what he wants.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because we see him drop her off, and there's that conflict, and she's so upset. She's crying. In fact, I think I even looked away the first time I was watching it, where it was
she's crying because she's like, "I did everything right.
Yeah,
why are you mad?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
she even says that, like, what did I do?
Yeah, over and over. What did I do? What did I do? And it's such a dramatic cut, like where it goes from them being happy, or you think it is, to her crying and being pulled away. And we have the moment of Gaston kind of like walking around Paris, thinking about. And it obviously, again, felt very similar to An American in Paris, where we have kind of like the final scene, not obviously a ballet.
And these are like really good shots, too. I got to give a lot of credit.
It is some of my favorite cinematography.
All the silhouettes they have.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful that you're like, where was this earlier? Yeah. And it's a really good job. And there's no singing at all. It's just the music and him thinking. But it gets that message across, I think, because of the visuals of it.
And... a note on the visuals that they go all to the same locations that they went to during the Gigi number.
Yeah.
And like the scene is him in complete silhouette, like walking away from the apartment. Every now and then he'll turn around and then be like, no, and then turn around and go. And he's going deeper and deeper into like Paris and into Parisian society. And he keeps second guessing, like, maybe I don't want to go deeper, until finally he turns around and is like, no, like, this is not the way I should be going. I want to go back to Gigi.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think from watching it, for me, it's like, oh, we've already had inner monologue from Gaston. Like, let's use some of that. Like, even give him a singing number. Like, I want more as a viewer, but I completely understand what you're saying. It is. I actually
think the visual storytelling here does all of that with him just like going forward and turning around.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah. And this might also sound a little mean, but I don't know if Louis Jourdan is a good enough actor to fully show that.
Well, he definitely can't sing. Or at least he can do spoken word well.
Yeah.
So the movie goes from his realization to he goes back, says he's going to marry her, and then
that's I think the key thing is that he's not just going to put her aside as his mistress. He's like, no, like, I want her as my wife. She is like the main thing. Because one of Gigi's concerns before was like, all right, like, we'll have fun for 15 years and then you'll cast me aside for just like another young woman. And she didn't want that. Now he's saying, no, I want you and I want you forever.
But couldn't that also be like divorce is still a thing? Like, I think like that.
I mean, yes, but when you propose, you're not saying we might get divorced.
Yeah,
even though you're 16, it will work out. Like, that's, I don't know. That's just where the cynic in me is like, are you sure about that? Like, are you really sure? Like that is what you want, and like that's what's gonna work out. And in a world, it probably does.
And I wonder, Austin, do you think if this film was less subtle in that way, where they show him thinking about it, they don't have like Gigi like express these notions as much, if it was more blatant and obvious, do you think people would hate on this film as much? If it is more clear that she gets what she actually wants at the end, she wants to marry someone, she wants someone to love her for who she is, and that's actually what's happening, but a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah, I think that if they make it less subtle, it will make people like the film more, but it would make it a worse film.
Which is really interesting, because I feel that same way.
What I will say, though, is that Gigi does have a great line I like. Although I think this is actually beforehand, before they go to dinner. I'd rather be miserable with you than without you.
Yes.
What a great line.
Yeah, I do
that
love
is a good
that
line.
Yeah, I love that line.
This movie does have moments where you see that shining light. You're like, oh my God, great. And then it falls back. Like, that's a really great line. Yeah. And then they're just, again, the other parts. There's also, and we're talking about just like one of the only lines that I wrote down that I thought was really funny was in Alicia saying, English, I suppose we must they refuse to learn French. And it's like, but you're saying that in English too? Like, why?
Well, they're saying it in English because it's an American.
But like, why can't you like take the? Why can't you say?
Did you know that in Schindler's List they weren't speaking English?
I know that. But sometimes it's like, just say some fucking French. And even in Schindler's List, there's some German that got said.
I mean, the German was spoken by the Nazis, and everyone else is speaking English.
Yes, there's a lot we get to say about Schindler's List. A lot of good things.
Glad we brought Schindler's List into the Gigi.
We've got Star Wars, Schindler's List. We've got Maid in Manhattan. Let's name it all. Psycho we talked about.
I think we talked a lot about Gigi. I think we really summarized the plot well, got through all the musical numbers. Austin, before we move to the 31st Academy Awards, we'll definitely talk more about Gigi as we hit the wins and the nominees, but anything else, any final thoughts about Gigi?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple things on the art direction. One of the biggest inspirations was the French artist Sem, spelled S-E-M, no first name, just Sem. And his drawings were actually in the opening title sequences. And that was the look they wanted to go for. That's like the idealized version of classic Paris, or Paris before the war. And I do think that they kind of succeeded in doing that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it represented the paintings that they showed really well. And I love the long strip where they kind of introduce and end the film in. I think it's so Paris and Parisian. I love it.
Yeah, I think there's no better time than just to jump right into the 31st Academy Awards.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chance of a Lifetime. Yes, sir, round and round she goes, and where she stops, only Price and Waterhouse knows. I want to tell you, I hope you all saved your ticket stubs because we're awarding the Oscars by number tonight. That's not true, but didn't feel good for a minute, huh? I want to say this is the big night of the year for Hollywood. All eyes of the world are focused on this stage. For some, there will be glory and applause. For others, heartbreak and tears. But enough about me. I'm used to it. I'm getting to be known as the Pagliacci of the teleprompter. And I don't care about an Oscar, really. I'd rather have friends. Now, for the first time, I have a good excuse for not being nominated this year. I haven't been well. And I'm getting sicker every minute. I'm here tonight against my doctor's orders. He wanted my tickets. Now, I wanted to do this show, but they want me to take things easy, so I've already lined up a job as wardrobe man on a Brigitte Bardot picture. The pay isn't much, but the fringe benefits are terrific. Incidentally, this Academy Awards show tonight has the largest viewing audience in history. Doesn't it give you a wonderful, warm feeling to know that all over America, millions of people are sitting in front of their television sets and saying, "What happened to Tales of Wells Fargo?" And I do want to announce that the awards may be held up for a few minutes. There's a little trouble backstage. Price caught Waterhouse with an eraser. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a great show tonight. To give you an idea, Ed Sullivan is in our audience. And it's a glamorous group. The cloakroom is crowded with mink and chinchilla and sables. They have an armed guard just to keep them from mating. But this is a great night, and Hollywood has had a great year. Some of the pictures were grim, but what realism. In fact, I'm surprised to see Susan Hayward here tonight. Now, they've seated all the nominees on the aisle this year so they can get to the stage quickly, but Hollywood has become jaded after so many years of Academy Awards. They're all just sitting there calmly in their mink stoles, black tie, and track shoes. They look wonderful. And you can feel the tension in the air. This makes Cape Canaveral look like a rest home. Yes, this is the only show in the world where the best acting is done by the losers. The program tonight will have five master of ceremonies, 5 MCs. What a waste. What'll there be left to say after I steal their idiot cards? Now, I was selected to open the show, and I'm going to be followed by David Niven. That is, if the balloon's on time. And after that, we'll have some amusing remarks by Mort Saul.
the favorite comedian of nuclear physicists everywhere. Mort's backstage putting pearl studs in his sweater right now. And incidentally, there's so many Englishmen on the show this year, backstage looks like the fallout from the Late Late Show. I put a dime in the Coke machine back there and a tea bag came out. We have Sir Laurence Olivier, David Niven, Peter Ustinov, Sir Alec Guinness. Sir Alec Guinness. Imagine knighting a comedian. How civilized can you get? The closest I ever came to being knighted over here was one day when Ike tapped me with a putter. He said, "That's my ball." Sir Lawrence should feel right at home here tonight because after the show, the losers gather in the parking lot and do the last scene from Hamlet. We have some wonderful new talent in the show, and Hollywood's always encouraged new talent. And this year we have such new faces as Russ Tamlin, Dean Jones, Ricky Nelson, Maurice Chevalier. Isn't that Chevalier great? He's been smiling for 70 years. Of course, you'd smile too if you put champagne on your Wheaties. I said you'd smile too if you put champagne on your Wheaties. That's all right. It's okay.
The 31st Academy Awards were held on April 6th, 1959, in the RKO Pantages Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles. The ceremony continued the new tradition by using an ensemble cast of actors that included Jerry Lewis, Mort Saul, Tony Randall, Bob Hope, David Niven, and Laurence Olivier.
The first award of the evening was the Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award, and that one went to Jack L. Warner.
And the Academy Honorary Award goes to Maurice Chevalier for his contributions to the world of entertainment for more than half a century.
Yeah, Maurice Chevalier is an interesting figure. He started out as like the toast of Paris, and then when sound came in to films, they were like, hey, we should get this guy from musicals. They paired him up with Ernst Lubitsch. They made The Love Parade, which is one of my favorite early sound musicals. It is one of the horniest movies ever made, and I highly, highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah. I'm going to add it just because you said that.
I showed clips of it to one of my roommates who hates musicals and hates everything in black and white, and he was laughing really hard at some of the jokes, and he's like, this is actually really good. The Love Parade from 1929, highly recommend it.
All right, that's good to know. And I think the other thing to note about Chevalier is what happened with him during World War II. And yeah, I think it's really important to bring up. So he was in France at the time. The Nazis took over. He was performing in France, and he actually, I think I read this correctly, he was married to a Jewish woman. And so they were able to kind of get to the safer...
All the more reason to like him.
Right. And so you get to like the safer parts of Paris, but he was also forced to perform for the Germans. And so a lot of people branded him as a Nazi sympathizer, which I don't like. As much as I hate his character as Henri, it definitely doesn't seem like to me that he was a Nazi sympathizer, that he was just caught up in what was going on and was forced into it. So that added a lot to why there was such a delay of him even coming back to the movies. So like that's why Gigi is such a big thing for him in his career, because he's back in the American eyes, and to come back and get an honorary award like this is pretty good, and it's great for him and his story.
Yeah, you'll see a big drought if you go on like his IMDb page, and it was because like no one wanted to work with him because he had such a big stink with that he performed for Nazis, even though he was kind of forced into doing so.
And moving on to Best Special Effects, this one went to Tom Howard for Tom Thumb. This is Howard's second and final Career Academy Award. He previously won for Blithe Spirit at the 19th Academy Awards. And Tom Thumb is about a boy, no bigger than a thumb, who manages to outwit two thieves determined to make a fortune by selling him.
Best Film Editing goes to Adrian Fazan for Gigi. This is Fazan's first and only Academy Award after previously being nominated for An American in Paris in 1951. Other notable films that she worked on were Anchors Away from 1954 and Singing in the Rain in 1952. So, we have Best Film Editing. We honestly didn't talk too much about the editing. Does it stand out for you guys? We have other big films like I Want to Live and the Defiant Ones that kind of show up throughout this award show. How do you guys feel about the editing of Gigi? We'll start with you, Austin.
I don't really notice it, which I guess is a compliment. But because many of the takes are so long, there's not even a ton for them to do with editing. I mean, a movie like I Want to Live, there is a lot of creative, flashy editing choices. So I certainly understand that nomination. But I think the editing in Gigi kind of fills its purpose. I don't know if it's Oscar worthy, but certainly not bad editing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with the editing. It does its part. It does it somewhat well. And I think that's it. And we mentioned it before, but there were so many long takes. So I think like that is what adds to, like, that's the pizzazz of this movie, is that, there are a lot of long takes. So the editing is very simple and just on beat. But moving on to Best Cinematography Color. This one goes to Joseph Ruttenberg for Gigi. So this is Ruttenberg's fourth and final career Academy Award. He previously won for The Great Waltz, Mrs. Miniver, and Somebody Up There Likes Me. The 4 total Academy Awards in the Best Cinematography Award, in the Best Cinematography category, is tied for the most ever with Leon Shamroy, who accomplished this feat in 1942. So we've talked about it. I gave my opinion on the CinemaScope aspect of this movie. For me, this movie, it still feels like it doesn't do enough. And it's funny that another movie that he won for is Mrs. Miniver, which is a movie we've talked about where there wasn't enough cinematography to really give it that. But I guess I do also understand like why this would win for that year. So I'm going to throw it to you guys, what you guys think about Ruttenberg's win here.
I think this is one of those cinematography wins where it's just a very pretty film. I would say similarly for fellow nominee Auntie Mame. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, I don't remember any particular like wow cinematography in that, and I haven't seen South Pacific or The Old Man and the Sea. But I mean, when you think of Gigi, you think of the look of the film. Like, it's just gorgeous to look at.
Yeah, I think you're not wrong in that sense. I think South Pacific, it's another musical. I would love to hear your thoughts whenever you get to watch that. And we've mentioned James Wong Howe for The Old Man and the Sea, or we've mentioned him in general as a very significant cinematographer. So I would love to go out of my way and watch The Old Man and the Sea. But yeah, it is there. It's not too flashy in terms of what you expect from a musical in terms of camera movements, but with everything that's on screen, it's pretty phenomenal. And I think they do some creative choices when it comes to kind of showing our musical numbers. Since they're not all about dancing, we kind of focus on characters and try to kind of go internal more. So I really appreciate it.
Before we move on, should we talk about movies that maybe should have been nominated? Or
if you got one, Austin,
yeah, bring it.
Let's hear it.
For Best Cinematography, I mean, there's several other movies that came out in 1958 that I think look better than Gigi does, at least on a cinematography standpoint. I mean, most obviously is Touch of Evil, which I know was like chopped up among its original release. Actually, I'm not even going to count Touch of Evil because that would be in the black and white category.
Yeah,
I'll get back to that in a second.
I was going to ask about that.
So instead, I'll say The Big Country, which is a fantastic Western epic from William Wyler. Outside of Best Years of Our Lives, that's probably my favorite film from him. It's an absolutely gorgeous film. It does very interesting things with cinematography. There's like this very ethereal sunrise fist fight between Gregory Peck and Charlton Heston that like the entire fight scene, I'm just like, this looks so incredible and is so perfect for this moment. I'm not surprised that Gigi won, but I am surprised that The Big Country was not nominated here.
Well, maybe they were in the politics of Academy Awards for like, oh, well, Ben-Hur is on the horizon, and we know that should be, that had to have been in people's minds too, because everyone knew about that production going on. That was such a big thing. So yeah, I like to sometimes think that the voters were like, oh, well, maybe we'll give it next year to Wyler.
Yeah, when people talk about biggest snubs, and I'll bring up something like this, they're just like, Shut up. No,
No,
no one knows what you're talking
No,
about.
I love it. I love those specifics and those snubs.
Yeah, it's the reason why we're having you on today, because
It's the reason why we even do this podcast.
Yeah, I've never seen The Big Country. I totally want to watch it now. It's added to my list. But moving on to Best Cinematography, Black and White, we have the winner here is Sam Levitt for The Defiant Ones. This is Levitt's first and only career win out of 3 total nominations. And we won't go into the story or the plot too much about The Defiant Ones. I know Austin and I have both seen it. In terms of cinematography, Austin, how do you feel about The Defiant Ones?
I think it's very well shot. They do a lot of night scenes, and they're all extremely well lit.
Yeah.
But not in like a you can tell that it's day for night kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Not overexposed. It's kind of the perfect amount. I know a lot of movies today or TV shows, when it's a night scene, it's just very dim. And you kind of, if you're watching on your computer, you kind of have to turn the brightness all the way up. But that is not the case with The Defiant Ones. It just kind of looks how it's supposed to look.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful, and I thought it had like a great pace to it in terms of even the way certain scenes were shot. You know, sometimes it would be kind of faster edited. You have a fist fight between the two men, or sometimes we just have a slow talking scene between the two, and it's just a slow push in as their two are talking, and you kind of learn more about these characters. But yeah, I thought it was absolutely stunning, and seeing the most recent remaster of the film is beautiful.
That being said, there are 2 black and white films that I would want to bring up that I think actually have even better cinematography. The first one is Touch of Evil, Orson Welles' film of this year, which I know is regarded as a classic now, but upon its release, it was very heavily cut to a much shorter version. Orson Welles famously wrote like a 20-page memo saying all the terrible choices that they made. But that was the release version. I think that's part of why it didn't get nominations. But even still, Russell Netty shot an absolutely beautiful film, which, I mean, cinematography-wise, just talk about that opening 3-minute shot is, cinematography-wise, one of the most influential films you could have. The other one, and I don't know if this would count because release dates with foreign films in the Oscars are often, it's very circumstantial, but a Polish film from director Andrzej Wajda, Ashes and Diamonds, one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. Beautiful shot by Jerry, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Wojcik. Just go on Google Images and type in Ashes and Diamonds 1958. You'll be blown away.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
Andrzej Wajda or Jerry Wojcik?
No, Ashes and Diamonds. What?
I mean, it's one of the more famous Polish films. On their 2012 Sight and Sound list, where critics and directors are listing their all-time favorite films, Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese put this in their top 10.
Okay, so
Bill Hader has cited it as a huge influence. So it's a very influential, very well-regarded film.
I think I heard Bill Hader say it. That's where. So all right, well that's going on the list because I've definitely heard of that movie before, but I'm glad you brought that up. But let's.
I think it's actually streaming on HBO Max.
Oh really?
Yeah.
All right, I guess I know what me and John are doing after this. Moving.
I don't know if it will be by the time this podcast airs. So you can always rent or get Criterion Channel.
Yes.
This podcast is brought to you by
God,
Criterion
I wish.
Channel.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Please. Moving on though to Best Costume Design. This one goes to Gigi for Cecil Beaton. So it's Beaton's first of 3 Career Academy Awards, and he would go on to win for My Fair Lady for both costume design and Best Art Direction. And I think the writers of Gigi also did My Fair Lady, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Lerner and
that's
Lowe.
another musical. We'll get to it that I'm not totally in love with, but we will get to that in less than 10 episodes.
I mean, they are very similar films to the point where when it was in production, people used to refer to it as Eliza in Paris, using Eliza Doolittle as the main character of My Fair Lady. But, I mean, I think this is a very obvious win.
Definitely.
Some of the best costumes in any movie.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Oh my God.
Every single one, every single dress. And we hadn't really talked about Gigi's iconic, famous dress. I don't even know what to call it. A swan-like dress with the black feathers coming off the shoulder. It's stunning. It's one of the best moments in the film, I think.
And not that, but just every single dress in the background. And there is so many. It was such like a mammoth job to pull off.
Yeah, and it's like...
And every single costume is exquisite.
Yeah, and one bad costume or one just not period costume could completely throw you out of the film, and it doesn't happen once, yeah.
Yeah. What I do want to mention, Some Came Running is nominated in this category. Some Came Running came out the same year, obviously, but it was directed also by Vincent Minnelli. He actually directed 3 films this year, including The Reluctant Debutante. So on top of a Best Picture winning film, he also made 2 other films. And at least nowadays, Some Came Running is often regarded as his best non-musical film.
Yeah, I always find it incredible when you hear about directors doing multiple films within a year, artists recording multiple albums within a year.
Yeah.
It's something that we don't get a lot of today. So I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, Soderbergh is really the only one that I think still does that, where it's just one after the other after the other. And one more thing I'd like to say about Some Came Running. Richard Linklater calls it his favorite film.
Ooh, wow. I love Linklater, so I got to check that out. Alrighty, moving on with Best Art Direction. Goes to Gigi. Art direction by William A. Horning and E. Preston Ames. Set direction by Henry Grace and F. Co. Gleason. This is Horning's first of 2 career wins, including Ben-Hur in 1959. Horning, however, died before ever receiving the physical award. A week before his death, he did receive the news of being nominated for Gigi. To date, Horning is the only person ever to win 2 posthumous Academy Awards in consecutive ceremonies, and some other notable films Horning worked on were The Wizard of Oz in 1939 and North by Northwest in 1959. So here again we have another award for Gigi, and that is art direction. We talked a little bit about the art direction and how much they kind of packed everything in the frame. Austin, what do you think about the art direction?
I mean, yeah, easy win. The only thing that I would maybe put over it is Vertigo, but that's mainly for like the crazy dream hallucination sequence that they have.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, again, it's just a stunning movie to look at. And actually, I didn't bring this up earlier, but they actually filmed a lot of this on location in Paris, which was especially difficult because, at least at the time, Paris is not in America. So they had to bring over everyone. But yeah, and for Gaston's bedroom, which we see a couple times, they actually had to shoot that in a museum. Because of how exquisite they wanted to have it look. So they had to be very careful with everything because they're shooting in an actual museum.
That's pretty cool. All right. I like that behind the scenes fact. Moving on though to Best Sound, this one goes to Fred Hines for South Pacific. This is Hines' second of 5 total Academy Awards. He would go on to receive Academy Awards for the Best Picture winners, West Side Story and The Sound of Music. And Hines, he has 5 Oscars in the Best Sound category, which is tied for the most ever with Thomas T. Moulton and Douglas Shear.
Best song goes to Gigi from Gigi. Music by Frederick Lowe, lyrics by Alan J. Lerner.
Gigi, am I a fool without a mind, or have I merely been too blind to realize? Oh, Gigi, why you've been growing up before my eyes. Gigi, you're not at all that funny, awkward little girl I knew. Oh no, overnight there's been a breathless change in you.
So I had asked Austin a little bit before in the podcast of what song he would have proposed as the song to be nominated. So Austin, what song would you have picked for Gigi to get the Best Song award?
I will say my answer to that is different from what is the best song in the film. Because I do think that the best song in the film is The Night They Invented Champagne. Probably followed by Thank Heaven for Little Girls and The Parisians. And then, I'm going to throw Say a Prayer for Me tonight. It's just such a beautiful little vignette of a song.
Yeah, I thought that would have been nominated when watching the movie. I thought that would have been the song.
Yeah, that song was actually originally written for My Fair Lady, but they wound up cutting it from that and recycled it here. So maybe that's why they didn't nominate that. Because the thing with Gigi is that it's one of the longer songs, and it's really like kind of like if you were to have a 45 record of a song from this movie, that would kind of be the one. Because the rest of the songs are all around the 2-minute mark. Plus, like on a sheet music level, I feel like if you were to cover any song, this would kind of be the one for it. Just like on an instrumental level. Because if you have a song, I really love The Night They Invented Champagne, but it's not even 2 minutes long. So I don't know if that would work. If you're trying to win an award, Gigi is probably your best bet.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's a really tough one. I don't think Gigi's my favorite, but to really pick one.
Well, I think Austin brings up an interesting point of what's required for it. How long does it have to be? And I would have to look at all the best song winners, but I think the theme from High Noon, I don't think it's a very long song. I think the runtime had to maybe 2.5 minutes, if that, at the most. So I think it's an interesting point to bring up, how much does length matter to the songs that get nominated, whether it's used entirely or not within the movie.
Yeah, and then there's also how relevant it is to the film, right? And with Gigi being the titular song, maybe they're like, yeah, we'll go with it. It's getting all these other awards. We've heard that name so much.
Best scoring of a musical picture goes to Gigi, to Andre Previn. This is Previn's first of 4 Academy Awards. Some of his wins would include Porgy and Bess and My Fair Lady.
So with respect to the other films in this category, which I have not seen and I'm sure are great, there's no chance they had of winning. I mean, goddamn. I do think it's weird that only Andre Previn got nominated and not Frederick Lowe, who wrote the basis for much of the music. But even still, he arranged nearly everything, with some help by Conrad Salinger on a couple moments. But Jesus Christ, this is gorgeous to listen to.
I mean, John, where does it rank for you then? Because in terms of Best Picture winners that are musicals, this one rates lowest for me. And there's some really great musicals, and there's some in between that aren't so good. But this one,
yeah, I don't even consider Broadway melody musicals.
Yeah, so. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking West Side, Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, Chicago.
Well, I haven't seen Chicago or My Fair Lady, so it's kind of hard to really say so. I know Alfred Newman. We've seen him pop up many times before, and South Pacific, I think I've seen high school productions of, and I know it's kind of continued on, and people are still adapting it today. So I would imagine that's the biggest up and coming. But in terms of what we've seen so far, this is probably my least favorite, but we haven't seen many. It's been only really one other really to compare it with. So yeah, I'm excited to compare it to My Fair Lady.
I will say, with this winning best score, there are only 2 scores really that I listen to outside of the context of the film. This is one of them. I mean, obviously I have the CD, and there's another one that I will mention later on.
Ooh, okay, held us in suspense.
Best scoring of a dramatic or comedy picture goes to Dmitry Tiomkin for The Old Man and the Sea. This is Tiomkin's 4th and final Academy Award. His previous wins include Best Score for The High and Mighty, High Noon, as well as Best Original Song for Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, from High Noon from 1952.
When I said earlier that there's a second score that I listen to outside of the film, not this film, you gotta keep waiting.
Oh, what a tease.
All right, well, let's...
But what I will say about this category is that I mentioned how much I love The Big Country. I do not like Jerome Morris's score for The Big Country.
Ooh.
That's one of the few things about the movie that I dislike, yet it still got one of the only 2 nominations that film got.
Interesting.
Well, moving on to Best Short Subject Cartoons. The winner for this one is John W. Burton for Nighty Night Bugs.
Best live action short subject goes to Walt Disney for Grand Canyon.
Best documentary short subject goes to Ama Girls to Ben Sharpstein.
Best documentary feature goes to Ben Sharpstein for White Wilderness.
2 documentary categories are in the same person. Congrats to you, Ben Sharpstein.
That's definitely the first time we've seen that.
Yeah. And going on to Best Foreign Language Film, this one goes to France for My Uncle.
Okay, remember when I said earlier?
Yes.
That,
Yes.
yeah, it's this.
It's
film.
this movie. Okay.
Yes.
What I looked up a little bit about this movie, and it seems like actually, I shouldn't say it seems like actually, it seems like an interesting plot and design. And it, from reading it, there's a lot of just background noise taking up most of the dialogue. That's from the brief summary I read. Like that's what goes on in this movie.
Yeah. This movie was written and directed and starring Jacques Tati, who is a very famous French comic actor. And he's almost like one of the silent comedians, but just in the 1950s and 60s. He has a character, Mr. Hulot. His films are mostly silent, and they're all like very, not even very slapsticky gags, but it's all gag-based. However, what I dislike about the films of Jacques Tati, which I know is very controversial, sorry. Imagine just like a Charlie Chaplin film in slow motion. The movies are very slow and very patience testing. And when the gags are good, they're great, but it's just a very slow pace for a slapstick comedy movie. And that's not what I want in my slapstick.
Americans are much faster, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
The dumbed down version.
I feel like that's the case for a lot of movies. Is I don't want it to be so slow that it's but you want it to have
you want it to have enough.
There's a fine balance to it.
You can still watch Chaplin films and be like engrossed by how fast they move sometimes, and just how it's after gag after gag after gag. Yeah.
But yeah, there is still some great stuff in the film. But the score for it is like, it puts me in my happy place. Like, even just like outside of it, like listen to it, that will put you more in France mentally than anything in Gigi would.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Interesting.
And I've been saying how much I love the score for Gigi.
Yeah. So to think there's something else you love more than that, I'll have to check it out. And interesting, it's another French, or at least French-based film. Have you been to Paris, Austin? Do you want to go? Is there like a certain love for the French that you have?
I've never been to Europe.
Oh, okay.
Wow, okay.
But, I mean, outside of the music of these two films, I don't have many strong attachments to France.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely say you would love Europe, and whenever you get the chance to go, you'll love it.
All right. Well, speaking of things I like about France, a movie that I think should have been nominated, but again, I don't know about eligibility, is Elevator to the Gallows, which came out in 1958. That's Louis Malle's first film, and most people know it because it was scored by Miles Davis. It has a great score starring John Moreau. And I don't know if they've said it, but I think that it had a huge influence on the Coen brothers. It's one of those movies where it starts out with a crime, and then it's just a domino effect of thing after thing going wrong, just spiraling into this whole giant chaotic mess. That while it's not necessarily a comedy, it is kind of very funny just how bad things get from this one decision.
And Miles Davis did the score for it?
Yeah.
All right. I'm in.
That's wild.
I'm so in.
Best screenplay based on material from another medium goes to Gigi. Alan J. Lerner from Gigi by Colette. This is Lerner's third and final Academy Award. He previously won Best Original Song for Gigi and won Best Original Screenplay for An American in Paris in 1951. Lerner would also go on to write and receive a nomination for My Fair Lady, which made him the first writer to write 3 Best Screenplays. The only other writer to do so is Francis Ford Coppola with Patton, The Godfather, and The Godfather Part 2. So, any other comments, thoughts? We hit on some other lines. Austin, are there any other lines that kind of jumped out to you? or any other kind of final thoughts that you have on Gigi's screenplay?
I do think that there are very interesting things going on underneath the surface, but I say that as someone that has seen this movie multiple times and can get that now, which I would not have gotten on my first go around.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know how different it is from the book. I know that they changed the uncle character a lot, but for this movie to win Best Screenplay, I feel like they would have to have done like a whole overhaul of the novel for it to win, because I just don't see this as a Best Screenplay winner.
Moving on to Best Story and Screenplay written directly for the screen. This one goes to The Defiant Ones, to Nedrick Young and Harold Jacob Smith. The Defiant Ones is a 1958 American adventure drama film that tells the story of two escaped prisoners, one white and one black, who are shackled together and who must cooperate in order to survive. It stars Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier and is directed by Stanley Kramer. This is Nedrick Young's and Harold Jacob Smith's first nomination win, but they would later go on to be nominated for Inherit the Wind in 1961. In the opening credits, two guards drive through a stormy night. The two men in the van are actually played by the movie's writers, Harold Jacob Smith and Nathan E. Douglas. The latter of the two, blacklisted at the time, is credited as Nedrick Young for his work on the Oscar-winning screenplay. And Kramer places both credits on the screen underneath the images of the two men in defiance of consistent blacklisting back in the day. There's been a lot of blacklisting over the years of the movies we've been talking about. So this is a cool stick it to the man moment for The Defiant Ones.
Such an awesome stick it to the man moment, and such an awesome film. And I thought this was a good time to kind of stop and talk about it for a moment. I know, Austin, you've seen it as well. One, what a bamf, like what a badass thing to do, put the names of the writers on there. There's no way they could ever get past it. Everyone's seeing the names publicly, and you can never kind of take that away. It's awesome. And it's such an amazing story that we can kind of take on and put ourselves in that time, in that place of Hollywood, and what it was actually like and how defiant people were of kind of kicking people out or not properly crediting them. But to the actual film, The Defiant Ones, I was kind of blown away by this movie. Not only were these such incredible performances by Poitier and Curtis, I just was torn. I was just like blown away by how they managed both of their relationship, dealing with it in a pretty subtle way for the time especially, and then kind of going back and forth between them being chased and them running away, using like the really hip, exciting like 50s rock music as they're kind of like using the dogs, and even all these side characters in the film I thought were like really well thought out and explored. And overall, I just found it like such an interesting story and totally worthy, in my opinion, of a best original story here. But Austin, tell me about your thoughts on the Defiant Ones.
I saw it very recently, and I kind of agree with you. It's a really good film. And on the screenplay level, they do have all these very interesting side characters, particularly Big Sam, portrayed by Lon Chaney Jr., who is so good in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I really wish he did more dramatic work, because, damn, he's really good in this. As good as Poitier and Curtis are, I think he kind of steals the film. But, yeah, for a movie about a black man and a white man handcuffed to each other from 1957, you would expect it to be, like, very preachy, but that is not what this film is at all.
Yeah.
I think very smartly, Tony Curtis's character, he's not like an overt 1957 movie racist where you're meant to hate him. He seems to just be very ordinarily racist, which is a very weird phrase to say. But they do some very interesting things, which I guess slight spoiler, but there are a couple moments where he's willing to like sell Sidney Poitier's character out. So they still have him like devaluing like the black person that he's tied to, but while still kind of respecting him in other human moments. It's a very interesting dynamic that they have. I think totally worthy of getting this Oscar.
Best Supporting Actress goes to Wendy Hiller for Separate Tables as Pat Cooper. This is Hiller's only career win. She had been previously nominated for Best Actress for her role as Eliza Doolittle in Pygmalion from 1938. She would go on to be nominated for Best Supporting Actress in 1966 Best Picture winner, A Man for All Seasons.
Best Supporting Actor goes to Burl Ives for The Big Country as Rufus Hannessy. This is Ives' only Career Academy Award win. He had previously been nominated for Best Original Song for his version of Lavender Blue in So Dear to My Heart from 1949.
I keep bringing up The Big Country and how much I like the film, and Burl Ives is really good in it. Burl Ives is an interesting figure. You'll see, I mean, you just mentioned that he was nominated for Best Original Song. Probably the most famous thing that we associate Burl Ives with is he's the voice of Sam the Snowman in the animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Oh.
So, like, the classic recordings of Holly Jolly Christmas and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, that's Burl Ives.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep. And in The Big Country, he plays kind of the villain of the film, or one of, like, the main antagonists, so it's very out of character for him. And I think that's part of why he won, but it's also just a great performance. Great movie. Everyone go see The Big Country.
Yes, everyone go see it. It's on our list, and I'm excited to go see it because of your enthusiasm for it. So definitely appreciate that.
Best Actress goes to Susan Hayward for I Want to Live as Barbara Graham. I Want to Live is a 1958 American biographical film noir directed by Robert Weiss and was nominated 6 times at the Academy Awards. It follows the life of Barbara Graham, a prostitute and habitual criminal who is convicted of a murder and faces capital punishment. The screenplay, written by Nelson Gidding and Don Mankiewicz, was adopted from personal letters written by Graham, in addition to newspaper articles written by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ed Montgomery. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times wrote that her performance was so vivid and so shattering, anyone who could sit through this ordeal without shivering and shuddering is made of stone. Susan Hayward even received 30% of the film's net profits, and Hayward has been nominated a total of 5 times, but this is her only Oscar win.
Best Actor went to David Niven for Separate Tables as Major David Angus Pollock. With 23 minutes and 39 seconds of screen time, Niven's performance in this movie is one of the shortest ever to win an Academy Award for Best Actor in a leading role. Niven also hosted the Academy Award ceremony this year, and he's the only person ever to win an Academy Award at the same ceremony where he was the host. And another note I just want to put on here, there are 0 acting nominations for Gigi, which is kind of remarkable. I know Chevalier got the honorary award, but I thought someone would have gotten some kind of supporting nomination. So it's kind of awkward to me that it won all these awards and did such a sweep, but it couldn't get an acting nomination. So it kind of is like, well, why didn't it get it? So I thought at least it could have gotten that. I don't know if any of you guys have thoughts or if you feel strongly about a certain character in Gigi that should have been nominated for an award. So I'll toss it to you, Austin, if you had anyone in mind.
I do really like Leslie Caron in the film, but the Best Actress category is really good. I mean, Rosalind Russell is iconic as Auntie Mame. Elizabeth Taylor is iconic as Maggie in Count on a Hot Tin Roof. Susan Hayward is excellent in I Want to Live. I haven't seen Separate Tables, but Deborah Carr is a great actress. Shirley MacLaine, I think, overdoes it a little bit in Some Came Running, but that's just like the other slot that would have gone to Leslie Caron. So I'm not upset about her not getting nominated. It is a good year for Best Actress. And I mean, kind of the same thing for Best Actor. I mean, Spencer Tracy, I haven't seen Old Man in the Sea, but Spencer Tracy's great. I haven't seen Separate Tables, but if you could win for not even 24 minutes of screen time, it's got to be a great performance. Paul Newman's great in Count on a Hot Tin Roof, and the dual leads of Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier. I mean, that takes up 2 slots right there. And I don't know if Louise Jourdan is really good enough to warrant getting nominated.
No, probably not. I could have seen Chevalier get it, but everyone else I think was there wasn't enough where I would have been okay with a nomination there, or feel like they should have gotten it.
Best Director goes to Vincente Minnelli for Gigi. Minnelli was previously nominated for An American in Paris, but this is his first Oscar win. What I found was really interesting is that Minnelli's first job was actually helping to design Windows window displays at the giant department store Marshall Field and Company, which might allude to the incredibly packed sets in Gigi. And another fun fact about Minnelli is he was married to Judy Garland from 1945 until 1951, and the couple are the parents of Liza Minnelli. So a couple of fun facts. I wanted to specifically point out the giant department store and window displays, because this film very much feels sometimes looking at a window display. It can feel kind of hollow if you don't look into it. I think further watching it kind of shows more of the subtlety, but just watching it from afar, and I think if you were to just walk in midway through this film, it would almost feel like a beautiful window display. Beautiful costumes, sets. There's so much jam-packed in to look at it. But yeah, any thoughts or any comments about Minnelli?
I think I've said my piece about the direction of this movie. I forgot that he didn't win for An American in Paris, so I kind of feel like he was robbed for that one at least. Especially because I think at that time he went through the divorce with Judy Garland, so I can imagine the stress that must have, the toll that must have taken on him. But yeah, I think I said my piece about his directing in this movie.
I think it's almost a deserved win. I mean, it's certainly not the most interestingly directed film, but this movie was such a massive undertaking in such a short amount of time that, I mean, just for him to be the leader and pull it off is a feat in and of itself. I also think that Minnelli's made so many classic films that this is kind of like we have a movie that you can win for, so we're going to give it to you now. I mean, I said before that he made Some Came Running the same year, and one other film whose title I don't remember. So that could also be brought into it. A lot of people really love Some Came Running, so they could have really been voting for that film while voting for this film. And just to bring back Linklater for a minute, I think that you see a lot of Vincent Minnelli in Richard Linklater's films. It's like the very wide shots, the very long takes, letting the actors fully act their performances, letting everything flow out naturally, and also the very varied filmography that Minnelli has. He has biopics, he has like wartime dramas, he has plenty of musicals. He has a very varied filmography, and I think he's a much more interesting figure than people give him credit for.
So moving on now to the Best Motion Picture category, the nominees are Separate Tables, The Defiant Ones, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Anti-Mame, and our winner of the 1958 Best Picture Award goes to Gigi, producer Arthur Freed. Gigi had the most clean sweep, the most amount of wins at the time, and for amounts that won. So if you go back, Wings won 2 for 2, Grand Hotel went 1 for 1, It Happened One Night went 5 for 5, and then Gigi in 1958 went 9 for 9, which is the most ever, which was surpassed a year later by Ben-Hur. And then the clean sweep got surpassed by The Lord of the Rings for 11 for 11 in 2003. So the day after the movie won 9 Oscars, MGM telephone operators were instructed to answer all phone calls with "Hello, MGGM." That must have gotten old quickly. And also, Gigi was the last film until The Last Emperor in 1987 to win Best Picture without any acting nominations. So before we give any of our own stats and what we feel about this movie, let's give some numbers for how other people feel about this movie. So Rotten Tomatoes currently gives it an 81% fresh rating, with an average Rotten Tomatoes rating of 7.53. The Topps Critics percentage give it a 75%, with an average rating of 8.8 out of 10. The audience score is a 74%, with a 3.84 out of 5. IMDb gives it a 6.7. Metacritic did not even give it a rating at all, and it went 9 for 9 for all of its Academy Award nominations. So I don't know who to pose this one to first, so I'll give it to Austin. Austin, what would you rate Gigi?
I'm kind of going with Rotten Tomatoes here. I'm feeling a 75.
All right, John.
We'll go down the ladder.
Yeah,
I would give Gigi a 40 out of 100. You know, I still just don't like the story. I wish I knew more about the characters, and I wish I got more invested. And yeah, I just kind of got out of it and lacked more from it. And in terms of other films, Grand Hotel is also a 40 for me. Anything below that, I think my lowest is still Broadway Melody. But yeah, 40 just felt like it's definitely below average for me. I wish it was more. I did actually appreciate it more talking to Austin, someone who loves the music and the soundtrack. I definitely got more out of it. And yeah, big pounding the back for you, Austin. I appreciate that. And it's something that I would not completely say don't watch it. You know, if you're into the Parisian culture, if you love seeing a kind of like watch a film and get taken to a certain place in time, I think there's value to this film in particular. And there's almost value in watching a film that is kind of disturbing and taboo, as we've kind of talked about.
Is there?
Well, tell me, Ben, what did you rate it?
Yeah, so I want to start this off by saying, Austin, you were great. It's awesome to have you on here as a guest, and you added...
Great to talk to you guys again.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, and I appreciate the enthusiasm you brought to this movie. I now have to say, though, if you weren't here, I think I would have been much more passionate and fiery about why I dislike this movie. When I first watched this movie, and I was giving it ratings when I first watched all these movies, I gave it a 15. And that was really because I was so upset by the subject matter of the movie. I was really just pissed, and especially because coming off of like The Bridge on the River Kwai is the movie before. Like at the time when I watched these movies, I did them all back because during the pandemic I had nothing else to do. So it was like every day I would watch one. So like coming off of The Bridge on the River Kwai, and then like Marty from a few years before, and like On the Waterfront, like there's so many great movies that I fell so much in love with. To then get this, I was so disappointed and so disheartened, and I was like, I could not believe that was the subject matter of a Best Picture winner about a young girl falling, like not even like a Lolita type of way, but just to like the way it was presented in this movie was so like, what the fuck? And then you add that whole like suicide, fake suicide, however you want to phrase it, into that, the lack of cinematography or lack of musical choreography, the lack of coverage, the misuse of CinemaScope, the music. I know you two loved it. It wasn't my favorite musical, and the way it was presented. So I kind of do want to bump it up a little bit, but I don't know. And I want to bump it up because we had like a great conversation about it. But I think I'm just going to leave it as is, because it really is not my favorite. It's my least favorite movie of all the Best Picture winners. Having seen them all, I really like. Broadway Melody is a close second to like my least favorite. So I really don't like Gigi. I appreciate the conversation that we had about it, but I really, for Best Picture winner, I expect a lot more, and the technical aspects just didn't do enough for me. I think that Cecil Beaton's production design, the costume design, and then the production design is what saved this movie, but it just... if those are the only good aspects, like what else makes the movie if there's no good story, no good technical aspects for me? So might seem really harsh. I know I go all over the spectrum, but I'll just leave it at that. So I'm going to pose the question that we all love to answer. And I'll pose it to you first, Austin, which is Gigi worthy of the Best Picture Award of 1958?
Given the nominees, yes.
Wow. Okay. Tell me more.
I mean, there are a lot of great films in 1958. I don't even know if Gigi would be in my top 5 for the year. But looking at the other nominees, Auntie Mame, I think, is very overrated. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is very good, but it's very much just like a filmed stage play kind of thing. Separate Tables I haven't seen. The Defiant Ones I really like, and I think would also be worthy. But if you look at like the films that have won that are like very light, fun films, I do think Gigi is one of the better ones that have. So I'm going to say it's worthy among the nominees that won. If something like The Big Country or Touch of Evil or Ashes and Diamonds were nominated, it would be a different story. Or even Vertigo were nominated to be a different story, but they weren't. So Gigi.
All right, John?
I think that's a total fair way of looking at it. For me personally, I would say it's not worthy. I think The Defiant Ones is a much more powerful film. I think it kind of shows where we are in 1958. It pushes boundaries. It was a closed set at the time when they were making the film because it was so controversial that they didn't even want the word of what they were even making to kind of go out. And I just think, not every extremely powerful political commentary film, should be presented and be Best Picture worthy just because of that. But I think this film does it in a sophisticated way where we learn a lot about these characters. It's a really engaging story with even engaging side characters. And I was really blown away by all the technical elements. I think it's beautifully shot. It has such a great audio recording with the song that keeps kind of coming through from Poitier, and I just loved it. I mean, Tony Curtis and Poitier, they're phenomenal in the film, and they really carry it. And I would have to give that as my worthy film for this year. But Ben, I need to know. I'm awaiting your 15 out of 100 to see if you think this is worthy or not.
No, it's not worthy. This movie's not worthy to me. I think I've said a lot about it. It just, I think if people want to go see it, go ahead. But in terms of all the other Best Picture winners out of the 90, what are we at, 94 total right now? It's 94 out of 94 for me. I don't know. It's very shocking. I asked my grandmother, what did people like about Gigi? Like, what was it? And she said, oh, it was Maurice Chevalier. Like, that was it. And then I was like, and you do recognize, like, what this movie's about. And then she was like, oh, you're right. But Maurice Chevalier was so good. So it's funny to hear, like, that perspective of someone who is alive and experienced it at that time. So, Austin, it's been great having you. Do you have any final thoughts on Gigi, Best Picture winners in general, the state of movies, all the Oscars? The floor is yours.
What I'll say with Gigi, if you trust their opinions over mine, here's what you do. You watch it, you can put it on in the background. You can only watch it once, it's fine. Then just listen to it on Spotify. Although when Thank Heaven for Little Girls comes on, maybe do a private session. But
that's totally fair. So,
yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. We appreciate you, Austin. We'll definitely talk more. So that's it. So I'm Ben.
And I'm Jon.
And this is Worthy.
Gaston, please. No newspapers, no scandal.
Madame, will you do me the honor, the favor, give me the infinite joy of bestowing on me Gigi's hand in marriage?
Thank him.
For little girls, get bigger every day. Thank heaven for little girls. They grow up in the most delightful way. Those little eyes so helpless and appealing, one day will flash and send you crashing through the ceiling. Thank heaven for little girls. Thank heaven for them all, no matter where, no matter who. Without them, what would little boys do? Thank heaven. Thank heaven. Thank heaven. Thank heaven. Thank heaven for little.
Thanks for listening to Worthy, the breakdown of every Best Picture winner from past to present. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Instagram at Worthy Podcast, on Twitter at Worthy Pod, and on Facebook at Worthy Podcast. Any inquiries can be submitted to worthysubmissions@gmail.com. Again, that's worthysubmissions@gmail.com.